And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
We'll be there.
This is GB News.
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threats on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people. To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
how did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's Newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do.
His comedy, though, is revolting. I knew her, and unlike you.
That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frosty in here, isn't it?
You'll have one of me one day.
Yeah, for dartball practice. Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning to you. It's 6 o'clock on Saturday, the 25th of May. Today, Tory grandees Michael Gove and Andrea Leadsom stand down as MPs at the next election as Rishi Sunak is set to spend the weekend locked in meetings.
And the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, claims inheritance tax goes against Tory values and promises to put tax breaks for the middle classes at the heart of the Tory manifesto.
Russia says it's ready to cease fire in Ukraine if the West recognises the current battlefield lines.
Elsewhere, Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York, furiously silences an audience at the Cannes Film Festival before launching into a speech about climate change, leaving the crowd utterly confused.
Everyone in this room, stop. Stop. Stop. Stop. Did you see? I removed the microphone. Because all of you are saying, oh, I want to go because where is the next party?
Should under-16s go smartphone-free? A report from MPs suggesting teens should be banned from owning smartphones to combat antisocial behaviour. We'll debate that later.
Fans of both Manchester City and Manchester United prepare to make their way to Wembley ahead of the FA Cup final this afternoon.
It could well be an early start as thousands of City and United fans prepare to make the journey down to Wembley ahead of kick-off at 3.
Yes, indeed, and it's not the only derby on Cup final day either. North of the border, it's the first Old Firm Scottish Cup final in 22 years as Celtic face Rangers at Hampden Park, and Wayne Rooney closes in on a return to management.
You may want to make the most of any dry and bright weather around today because for many of us it is going to be the driest day of the long weekend. I'll have more details coming up.
Morning to you, I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and you're watching Breakfast here on GB News.
To the most important matter of the day, and I don't want to get too personal.
Oh?
But have you had issues with people snoring in the past?
Oh, I see.
Actually,
yes.
I'll tell you what, your boys...
Yeah, one of them particularly snores loudly.
Oh.
Wakes up the entire house.
Oh.
And it worries him.
Yeah.
And it worried his girlfriend in the past as well.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, young people nowadays want to be together, but she just said, no, is there a bedroom furthest away from Connor Pot? Oh,
Sorry,
I said his name,
Sorry, Connor.
But yeah, he'd admit, he snores loudly, and it's a problem, and he hates it. And so does the rest of the family. What are you meant to do about it?
Well, you're meant to play the didgeridoo. This is in the Star, this one. It sounds stupid, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's actually a proper thing from Sophie Bostock, who's a top medic.
Well, it is all about breathing.
Yes.
And I think when you play the didgeridoo, you don't just play the note when you're breathing out, you actually suck it back in as well.
You suck it in.
You do.
Well, she's the founder of The Sleep Scientist, which is an app, apparently. But if you can learn to play the didgeridoo within 3 months, then your snoring could at least reduce.
Yeah, but it's a noisy instrument in itself, and I'm not sure you want a didgeridoo being played in the house either,
Yeah, but you
do
wouldn't play it at night time, would you? That's the thing.
Well, no, I suppose not.
You have to go and play it in the shed if you've got one. But anyway, so there you go. So you can reduce your snoring by blowing
learning
and
to breathe
sucking
better
down the didgeridoo.
Yeah.
So there you go. I wake myself up
Fascinating.
snoring sometimes.
Oh, are you a snorer?
I think so.
Well, you are if you wake yourself up.
I have woken myself up once and think, what's that noise? And then realise it's me. So there you go. So I need
It's charming. Actually, it really is quite a big problem, isn't it? You can get those funny nose sticky things.
I don't know if they work or not.
I think that they do.
I couldn't be bothered to put one of those on.
But some people, when they snore, it is an unbelievably loud noise. Yeah. And when I was a student, I was sharing a room once with a girl who grinded her teeth at night. And that's not the noise that you would just imagine is it's not. It's a really weird noise. It almost sounds like muscle and gristle being pulled together. And she said if I do that, just come in and just really push me hard into another sleeping position. But you'd have to do that 2-3 times a night.
You shove a little tangerine in her mouth.
Well, that's one way to do it, yeah. But it is one of those sleep problems that actually we make fun of, but can be a very, very big problem indeed.
So there you go. Didgeridoo or other such strong wind instrument could just do the trick.
Well, it's a welcome break from talking politics all the time, isn't it?
Yes, it is. We're going to get a bit fed up with it. But what can you do?
What can you do?
At least it's only 6 weeks. It could have been a lot longer. Yeah. Anyway, amidst all of this, Dame Andrea Leadsom has become the latest MP to announce she's not going to stand at the election.
And, of course, that comes very shortly after Michael Gove posted his resignation letter, saying it's time for a new generation to lead.
Well, we now think that 78 Tory MPs are stepping down. That's a post-war record-breaking exodus.
It really does feel weird, doesn't it? Joining us now is the former Labour advisor, Lauren Bell-Cross. A very good morning to you. What are your first thoughts on this mass exodus?
It's extraordinary, really. I mean, you've got MPs that have been key to the last few Conservative governments, people like Michael Gove, Dominic Raab, Sajid Javid. This is a huge exodus of very important and very big people that will no longer be able to be ministers if the Conservatives do make it to the next government. They're going to have to fill a record number of vacancies for these seats as well. So it's going to be, I think he's caught everybody by surprise, including a lot of his own party's infrastructure of just having to go through a very quick process of selection. So do you vet these candidates? How far have you vetted them? Are you then going to, in the event of an unexpected success, now have a new load of MPs who you don't know very much about, who you don't have huge amounts of details on, that can then potentially be open to further scandal? It's big questions, and both parties are going to have to deal with it. But I think the Conservatives in particular, with these record numbers of, you said 78 MPs stepping down, that's huge, a record.
Yeah, I mean, we already know they've got about 100 constituencies where they haven't got a PPC in yet. And look, churn happens, and it's not necessarily a bad thing because it does bring new people to the fore. But you've got to question this, haven't you? Because, obviously, I mean, these are very late announcements.
Well, indeed. And I think there was, I was reading in the papers this morning of Michael Gove saying at the cabinet meeting of the election when this was announced, saying, oh, quoting the SES's motto, who dares wins. And he's now not going to restand and going to go away from his seat. So, yes, churn can be good, but when it's this scale of churn and this unexpected scale of churn, I think it's not. I think a lot of Conservative activists will be worried and say, literally going around the country, trying to convince voters to vote for them, when a lot of their grandees saying, do you know what, we've had enough now.
On the other hand, I guess Labour's got to be very careful not to become complacent over this.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think the C word is being banned from Labour HQ. What I thought has been interesting so far of the campaign launches in the sort of 2 active days that we've had, the first stop on Keir Starmer's campaign was to Gillingham in Kent. Now, this is a seat that has not been won by Labour since 2005, so nearly 20 years. But it's the kind of seat in the Thames Estuary, which there are a few others, where the path to Downing Street has to go via these places. They cannot win otherwise. But what's interesting is they're not just focusing on winning back the red wall seats that were lost in 2019. It's these seats in Kent as well that they just have to win. Similarly, the second spot on the campaign trail was Scotland. They have to win there. And you're seeing now, you've got a very good, capable leader in Anna Sarwar. They're currently, I think, last poll I saw was 10 points ahead of the SNP. It's not going to be... Previously, there have been these calls for Labour to have a progressive alliance and go easy on the SNP and say, well, we're all anti the Conservatives, so let's all get along. No, they have to have a majority, a Labour majority, and not be dependent on the SNP. Because in 2015, we all were traumatised by those campaign posters by the Conservatives of Ed Miliband in the pocket of Alex Salmond, and the effect that those had was lasting, and they want to remedy any chance of that happening again.
Yeah, well, look, they've still got a lot of work to do then. It's interesting that the Chancellor has said inheritance tax is not Conservative. It's issues like that, isn't it, where Labour's going to have to do some shifting, I would have thought, because it's about winning over Middle Britain. It might not be a tax which affects that many people on the great scheme of things, but Middle Britain feels very squeezed, and that's where a lot of your floating voters actually are.
Yeah, that's a very good point, and I think it's going to be... I was surprised by how cautious Jeremy Hunt and the Conservatives have been on this, because I would have thought with this announcement now, they've got to go something big and sort of throw a bit of red meat to their activists and say, right, this is a big tax thing that Labour wouldn't dare do, and we're now doing. But then the fact that they're not and trying to say, oh, well, we're steadying the ship, we're being responsible. If you've been in charge for 14 years and let's be honest about this, things aren't going great for them when you're 20 points behind in the polls, it's not really a great sell for people, is it? I think what Labour's going to have to put out a fully costed manifesto, and I think they'll do that very, very shortly with all the details of all the funding, particularly I think on issues like Great British Energy, they're going to have an answer for, because up till now, it's been a bit vague on detail. Some shadow ministers, have been caught short, not knowing the exact sums and figures. Once that's in a manifesto, they can then go out on the stump to both voters and TV studios and say, right, this is how much it costs, this is how much we want to save the public. And I think people are going to be receptive to it because, in particular, when it comes to energy companies, a few days ago you had the energy company SSE announce £2 billion of profits. You know, one of the other energy companies, EDF, it stands for Énergie de France. It's a state-owned company. It's just owned by the French state, making money off British consumers. So I think there is an audience for that, and I think there's a potentially receptive message for that for Labour across the doorstep in the country.
OK. Lauren Belcross, good to talk to you. Thank you.
Also joining us now is the senior political analyst for Orthodox Conservatives, David Moore. A very good morning to you. As we start the weekend, we'll see Rishi Sunak and others out and about. But it wasn't a great start to his campaign, was it, with the rain on him and getting football wrong and what was the other? Oh, yeah, and talking from the Titanic. Do you think over the weekend, I think it said that he's going to have a family day today, isn't it?
I don't know.
A sort of day off. But certainly over the weekend, aren't they going to have to rethink their look, the way we were all perceiving the campaign?
Well, firstly, as the Prime Minister, they should be able to speak clearly without interference. And personally, I think it was utterly disrespectful, some of the speakers going out from behind the gates at number 10. I think what we need is a really strong start to a campaign. When you have a snap election, you need a really strong start. And I think a load of Conservatives, to be fair, they were a bit surprised at first by this announcement. However, I've been on the show before calling for an election because this needs to be solved, and we need to have an election and we have a national conversation about where this country wants to go. And this country needs to scrap inheritance tax. We need lower taxation. We need to leave the European Court of Human Rights to stop the votes and actually get some Conservative policies in. And I really, really hope that Rishi can actually get together a strong manifesto where we can deliver that. Because at the end of the day, this country at the moment, the only way the Conservatives can lose this is Conservative voters not going out to vote. It's getting that vote out there, aka going to the Conservative voters, whether it be in the Red Wall, in the South, across the country, having some strong leadership. Because the only way Keir's going to get in is when Conservative voters don't go out and vote. He's not going to get any more Labour votes. It's the case of the Conservative voters are going to stay at home or not. And it's about getting them out to vote.
Well, yeah, and look, it's great to say lower taxes, and that's a very Conservative thing to do. And, I mean, who wouldn't want lower taxes? Let's be perfectly honest. However, it's just not doable. They can't promise things that they can't do, can they? I mean, the Institute for Fiscal Studies saying today that the state of public finances will hang over the new government, whoever it is, like a dark cloud.
Well, we just have to, in some areas, just have to cut on public spending. This is the issue. This is the issue at hand. The British taxpayer is sick and tired of being regulated to death. They're sick and tired of, all these agencies that Mr. Blair sets up that we didn't repeal. We need to do that. And quite frankly, all these quangos that we're just sitting on a pile on, we haven't repealed enough of them. And that's why we need to actually have some proper regulatory reform and proper state level reform that the likes of Thatcher would like to see. And we need to be brave. We need more conviction-led leaders in this country, quite frankly, to say that, look, this country is not creating enough wealth, we're not manufacturing enough, we're not actually creating wealth, but we just have this, the quagmire of the state is coming back. And if Keir wins, you know how much worse that's going to get. If you think it's bad now, for the next 5 years, people are going to see these tax rises. Businesses are going to face issues. We obviously have the public schools VAT issue where we're going to have thousands of young people being shut out of education, those who can barely afford, a private education. We'll see the armed forces seeing a risk. This man's happily served under Corbyn as well. He's just changed his tune because he has this new PR look where he's got the Union Jack on his leaflets. Oh, wow, he's so patriotic now. He's got British flags flying at the conference. Let's be honest, this man is another Blair. He's a pound shot Blair, and he's about as charismatic as my coffee table. I mean, he likes to think he's like Blair, but a bit more than that. But history repeats itself, and I'm very concerned.
OK, David Moore, good to talk to you this morning. Thank you.
I mean, you could argue that at least having a couple of Union flags behind you when you're making a speech is better than being poured upon by the rain and not being able to be heard because...
Well, I have to say, I think playing things can only get better in the background. It's just rude.
Yeah, but somebody should have anticipated that.
They should have done, but the police should have stopped it. And that is, I'm not being party political on that. It's just rude.
Yeah, it is.
Wouldn't do it to whoever was
It's not just
speaking.
rude to the Prime Minister or the leader of the Tory party. It's rude to us voters because we couldn't hear what he was saying. And I think, you know, during an election campaign, you have to at least be able to hear what all the candidates are saying, surely.
You'd think so. Anyway, we can hear now what Ed Davey, leader of the Lib Dems, was saying last night. His view on the chance of the Lib Dems taking seats from the Tories.
There are so many seats that have been traditionally Conservative that the Liberal Democrats are the ones who can take off them. And increasingly in the southwest, the West Country, which used to be a stronghold for the Liberal Democrats, we're back there again. We've seen that in the by-election victories in Somerset and Devon. We've seen that in council victories this year in Dorset, last year in Devon, the previous year in Somerset. So across the south of England, I think people realise now if they want to get rid of the Conservatives, they vote Liberal Democrat.
OK, well, we've heard from all three of them at the moment. We'll be talking a lot more throughout the programme, of course, about the upcoming election. Right now, though, should we look elsewhere in the world where trouble is always brewing? Russian sources have claimed that Vladimir Putin is ready to pause the war in Ukraine.
Well, a ceasefire could be negotiated, apparently, if the West agreed to recognise the current battlefield lines.
Previously, the Ukrainian President, Volodymyr Zelensky, has ruled out, of course, the possibility of a ceasefire, dubbing talks with Moscow impossible.
Let's talk to the defence editor at the Evening Standard, Robert Fox. Morning to you, Robert. Is this game playing, or is this a genuine offer?
There is something going on. There is absolutely clear that this is not just a game from Putin to upset everybody as they're getting together next month, where there is a peace terms conference in Switzerland, over 70 countries, but no Russia, no China there, and no Joe Biden, who has decided, although he's in Europe, to skip back to LA to go on an election fundraiser with Julia Roberts. But it's a bit of that, but there's a very strong report from Reuters naming 5 anonymous sources, but 5 anonymous sources in the Kremlin circle saying, yes, Putin is serious about this. He wants to open negotiations. There is a threat. It's real blackmail. I'd like to talk about this. By the way, he has a lot on his plate at the moment. But if you don't talk, I'm going to trash Kharkiv, for example. That hasn't come out, but sources revealed to me last night that that's what the game is. I'm serious about this. I want peace, but I'm going to smash up Kharkiv if you don't open it. And can I just add, as you had rightly in your headline, there is a problem with Zelensky here. One of the big criticisms of Zelensky is that he didn't keep a back channel going throughout to Moscow, which he was advised to from the beginning. And actually, it's what you always have to do.
Well, even when Russia is invading your country and you're having to lose lives in order to defend battlefield lines, you have to, as a leader, keep a back door open for talks.
With things like humanitarian issues, repatriation of bodies, and that hasn't been a great success. I mean, neither side has been playing to the rules, as we know, in these kinds of wars, not that it ever fully happens. But Zelensky himself, curiously, being what he is from his background, is acutely aware of opinion polls. He's put off the president of the election so that he's there for a bit, but he is very worried about his own position, the decline in his personal position, and he's following. And the opinion polls are very assiduous in Ukraine. It is a very fluid position.
Can I ask, though, with an election happening here now, and with obviously the presidential election later in the year in the United States, how does this play into what the Kremlin's doing?
There's something else that's playing. That does very much. It's an election here, the election for the European Parliament, which may not seem a terrific deliverer of power, but it's a bellwether test. It's a really supreme opinion test of who is for war and against, because that will come up, as it won't come up in the general election here if it can possibly be avoided. And both Labour HQ and Tory HQ do not want the war to come into it. And, of course, anticipating what's going to come up in America. Sorry, I always have to add in the other perverse element. The recent summit between Xi Jinping and Russia, and this is the new...
Who's the greatest danger to all of us?
Well, it's a chain now. It's a part of things. I was going to say that's what came out of that summit, is we're in this together. It is now absolutely clear China is delivering a lot of lethal aid, sophisticated weapons to Russia, so that has undermined its position as an honest broker. But they're saying to Russia, we're in it for you. You've got to be in it for us, as things are building up in the Far East, including in Asia itself, Central Asia itself. That is not making the news at all, let alone a headline.
OK, Robert, for now, thank you very much indeed.
I guess we're all distracted elsewhere, aren't we?
Yeah.
OK, let's move on. Oh, I can't tell you the time because I can't see the clock. It's 6:21. In fact, it's just coming up to 6:22. Let's have a look at some of the other stories coming into the newsroom this morning.
Well, the former boss of the Post Office has been accused of living in La La Land over her role in the Horizon scandal. Paula Venables became emotional on the third day of giving evidence. She admitted making mistakes and accepted there was no one else to blame, but claimed she didn't know why important information didn't reach her.
The Italian teenager Carlo Axitus, who died of leukemia, is set to become the Catholic Church's first Millennial Saint. Pope Francis has attributed 2 miracles to the youngster, who was actually born in London, one of which involved him healing a university student in Florence. He actually used his computer skills to spread the Catholic faith during his sadly short life.
The documentary filmmaker Morgan Spurlock has died at the age of 53. He came to prominence with his Oscar-nominated film Super Size Me, that was back in 2004, which tracked his health while he ate nothing but McDonald's for a month. The film was credited with prompting a broad conversation about how fast food and obesity was impacting society. He passed away in New York, suffering from cancer.
I'm fascinated by that young saint. An incredible story, it really is.
Yes, I don't know what to think of it. I'm slightly torn.
Yeah.
Because he was revered because his body was put on display and didn't appear to decay, but actually it was doing.
Yes.
And it all just seems a bit grim for a 15-year-old and his body to be displayed out like that.
It does.
So I don't know. I don't know what to think.
I don't know, but it's fascinating that here we are in this century now, and we still are making people saints, and that is extraordinary too, because all of them have the most amazing story. But he was such an young and unusual case, and of course the Catholic Church is hoping that he reaches out to young people.
Yeah. Right, should we talk about the Duchess of York? She's had a bit of an outburst at the Cannes Film Festival. Have a listen to this.
To everyone in this room, stop. Stop. Stop. Stop. Did you see? I removed the microphone. Because all of you are saying, oh, I want to go, because where is the next party?
What on earth is all you can say to that? Let's ask royal broadcaster and photographer Helena Chard. Good morning, Helena. What on earth was that about?
I have to say, I think she's such good fun, and she looked wonderful. She certainly can hold an audience. I think she's really gung-ho, and obviously people were in high spirits and having drinks and just enjoying themselves at the Cannes Film Festival, and she wanted people to listen to her, but she managed to do it. I think she was a little bit frustrated. I think people were saying she was furious. But she wasn't furious. She was just, I suppose, felt slightly silenced. But the audience, in the end, they did listen. She was actually there. It was a great event. But she was there.
Well, she was a little bit something, Helena, wasn't she? I don't know about furious, but a little bit something.
A little bit something is a little bit tiddly, or a little bit. She was very she seemed quite highly wired, I have to say, but she was there for good reasons. And it was for the Foundation for AIDS Research, so improving the treatment of AIDS and HIV prevention around the world. And she talked about Gen Z and, supporting them. There were lots of things that she was talking about, but she did talk about a variety of things. I have to say, she did talk about climate in that, and I wasn't quite sure how that really went hand in hand with what she was doing. But I think she was just trying to get everyone's attention and saying, come on, guys, let's all pull together. It's all about unity and, supporting each other and trying to make life better. I think that's where she was coming from.
Yeah, but she wasn't reading the room, was she? Because, there she is talking to an enormous audience full of lovies, because that's what the film festival is all about. And she was trying to lecture them on climate change. And then she went a bit patronising, didn't she, by saying, look, I'm removing the microphone when I want to. I won't talk to you until you're good. It came across a bit that way, didn't it?
It did a little bit, but I do think there were other people, Demi Moore, there were other, lovies in the room who were also trying to communicate with the audience. And I just, I do love Fergie. I think she's a good egg. And goodness me, she's under a lot of pressure. Battling 2 types of cancer within 8 months. And obviously her ex-husband and the whole thing about Royal Lodge and, are they going to be moved out or not? There's a lot of stress there. But I think, all in all, she does a lot of good. And the fact that she's ambassador now for the Gen Z generation, the age 13 to 26-year-olds. She talks about, how bright and strong they are. And she relates to them, because I think she's felt quite picked on over the years as Fergie, as such. But I don't know. I think it was quite good fun. And at the end of the day, this portrait was auctioned off, and that was really what it was all about as well.
There's nothing like flying down to the south of France to talk about climate change. That's what I say. Helena, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed.
She's made a headline or two today, and she did look good, there's no doubt about that, and I wish her well.
Very odd, though. Just odd.
Yeah, I know. But they are, aren't they?
They can be a little
Have you done the Cannes Film Festival?
No, I've met Fergie.
Oh, yeah, me too.
A little bit.
Yeah, she's a character.
Anyway, right, shall we see what the weather's got in store for you today?
It's going to be hot.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning. Here's your latest GB News weather forecast brought to you by the Met Office. It's fair to say the weather this weekend is going to be pretty messy. However, today actually looks largely dry for many of us because there's a relatively slack flow across the country at the moment, though there are some systems waiting out towards the west and the east, which are going to bring some rain later. But for the time being, a bit of a chilly start because we had some clear skies overnight. That does mean quite a bit of sunshine this morning. However, we are going to see a bit more cloud bubbling up as we go into the afternoon, and there will be some showers around, most of us avoiding these, but towards eastern areas, East Anglia, Lincolnshire, we are going to see a bit of rain pushing its way in as we go through the afternoon. In any sunshine, it's going to feel pleasantly warm. Temperatures a touch higher than yesterday, highs of around 22 or 23 Celsius. It is going to turn pretty wet as we go through this evening and overnight. We have some rain across northern and eastern parts, and then a swathe of wet weather feeding its way up from the southwest. Could see some heavy bursts as that pushes its way northeastwards across many parts. Because of the cloud and the rain, temperatures aren't going to drop a huge amount, so it's going to be a milder start to the day tomorrow than it was this morning. It is also going to be quite a cloudy and at times wet picture. Most of us will see some rain at times. Showery outbreaks to start off with, and then plenty of showers developing as we go towards lunchtime and the afternoon. Some of these could pack quite a punch. Some torrential downpours are possible, as well as some hail and some thunder. There will be some sunny spells in between the showers though, and in any of these it should still feel warm enough, even though temperatures are down a couple of degrees compared to today. A quick look to Bank Holiday Monday, and after an initially dry start in the east, it's going to be another largely cloudy picture for many. Further outbreaks of showery rain. Again, these could be a little bit heavy at times, but there are some signs that we could see something a little bit drier developing towards western and southwestern parts as we go through the afternoon. Temperatures, though, down a little bit compared to tomorrow. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Here's some good news for you this morning. £20,000 must be won in the Great British Giveaway, so don't miss out.
Now, lines are apparently going to close, or have they already closed yesterday?
No,
This coming Friday, lines close. So you better get going. Here's all the details you need for your chance to win the cash.
It's the final week to see how you can win a whopping £20,000 cash. And because it's totally tax-free, every single penny will be in your bank account to do whatever you like with. £20,000 in tax-free cash really could be yours this summer. Hurry, as lines close on Friday. You've got to be in it to win it. For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Yeah, best of luck to you.
Now, do stick with us because still to come, it's a big day today. FA Cup final day is upon us. A clash, apparently, between Manchester United and City. Who will claim the top prize? Well, Aidan will tell us next.
Sunday nights on GB News. From 6, Neil Oliver. At 7, it's Free Speech Nation with Andrew Doyle. At 9, Mark Dolan. And at 11, get set for the week ahead with headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your-say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's Newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do.
His comedy, though, is revolting. I knew her, unlike you.
That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frosty in here, isn't it?
He'll have one of me one day.
For dartball practice. Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
6:34, time for the sport this morning. Aidan's here, good morning.
Indeed.
And it's the big day today.
Oh, it's a huge day, yeah, exactly. I mean, we're building up in earnest for the FA Cup final. I mean, back in the day, it used to start at 9 a.m. this, just on TV, just a live coverage, but for goodness me. Oh, we've got the
your mic's not on.
Oh, right, okay.
I mean, it's a deliberate ploy from us. Oh, it is on.
Yeah, it is on.
It is on.
It's a big day to be able... We need to be able to hear you today,
We do, indeed, we do. Well, we'll sort that out in a moment, but for now... Oh, it is murky. For now, we're going to cross live to Manchester and Sophie Reaper because I believe she's got some fans who are joining her now as they set out to Wembley. It's a pretty early start, Sophie, isn't it?
It is a very early start, and the coaches will be picking these fans here up at around 7 o'clock as they make the journey down to Wembley. And as you say, I'm joined now by two Manchester United fans, Colin and Sue. A very good morning to you both. Thank you for joining us. Now, it's a very big day, this, for United fans. It's not been the easiest of seasons for you, and obviously, last year, not a great result either in the FA Cup final. How are you both feeling?
Optimistic.
Nervous. Yeah.
Nervous.
Nervous.
Let's have some score predictions. Sue?
2-1 to United.
2-1. So the opposite of last year. Yes. And do you think you'll get a goal quicker than İlkay Gundogan last year in the first 12 seconds?
Got to.
That would be good if you could do that. Colin, score predictions?
I'm going to say 3-2 to United.
Wow, so few goals you're hoping for. That would be impressive.
Well, we need the goals, don't we, just to give it a kick.
To get into it. Now, interestingly, we were speaking before. I know you're a United season ticket holder. Colin, this is your second ever football game, isn't it? Quite the scale to be going to Wembley for your second ever match.
It is, and I'm not going to say how many years, but I was 16 when I first seen the first one. That was when Stanley Matthews were playing for Stoke against Bury. It rained so hard. I've never been to one since. But hopefully that might be a good thing.
Hopefully it'll be a good result for you today, because that's absolutely incredible.
Bit of sunshine, I might go again.
Absolutely. Now, we were speaking earlier, Erik ten Hag. I know you're not his biggest fan after this season. Could today save him in your mind with you know, if it's a good result? Would you want him to stay then?
No. To fall out with Ronaldo, to fall out with Sancho, Rashford's performance, somehow or other, I don't think he gels with players very well. I think he's authoritarian. I think a lot of our injuries are probably, it's sort of rumoured he trains people too hard. Never had so many injuries. And I don't rate him at all.
Well, absolutely. Fair enough. Thank you both so much for your time this morning. Lovely chatting to you, and best of luck.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Well, there we go. We'll be joining some City fans a little bit later on to get their reaction ahead of this FA Cup final down in Wembley today.
Thanks very much indeed, Sophie. So that's the fans' view on the streets of Manchester, starting out early, heading off to Wembley, getting on those trains. No strikes. I think there were last year, as I recall, but I'll be heading to the game later on as well.
Traditionally, it has to be at Wembley, does it? But it just seems a shame when it's two Manchester teams. Why they don't do it up there?
Yeah, well, the problem there, Anne, is that the FA spent a hell of a lot of money on that stadium. They have to have the showpiece events at Wembley. It's traditional as well. But I remember being at an Aston Villa again. I know it was Chelsea versus Arsenal match, I think it was. And it was a semi-final at Wembley. The following day, Everton played Manchester United, and there were all sorts of chaos because there was a train strike.
Yeah, and the fans were in the wrong place.
Nobody could get back.
Yeah.
It's fine. It was fine the previous day because it was all London. Yeah. But it was a real challenge for North West fans, and it does rear its head every now and again. There was talk that the National Stadium would be built in Birmingham, wasn't there? But as somebody said to me at the time, it seems to be a straight battle between the north and south of London.
Yeah.
Well, yes.
Well, yeah. Hey, mind you, there's plenty going on in Scotland as well.
Yes, indeed. We've got the Old Firm facing off against each other at Hampden Park. Incredibly, given the dominance of these two sides, especially Celtic, it's the first time they've faced each other in a Scottish Cup final since way back in 2002. Now, Rangers have taken 1 point throughout the season against Celtic, and that might prove their undoing today because Celtic are going for a double of League and Cup. Rangers are going for a double of both Cup competitions, so plenty at stake. Full house will be there as well, and I fancy Celtic to win that one, I really do.
Right.
Okay. Yep. OK, big news. We'll move on then. We'll talk a bit later about Wayne Rooney and what he's doing next. But do stay with us. Still to come, we're going to go through the papers, obviously, look at what's making the news with Cindy Yu and Fraser Myers. So that's all coming up next.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's Newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do.
His comedy, though, is revolting. I knew her, unlike you.
That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frosty in here, isn't it?
He'll have one of me one day.
For dartball practice. Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel. GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
At 6:42, time to see what's in the papers this morning with assistant editor of The Spectator, Cindy Yu, and deputy editor of Spiked, Fraser Myers. Good to see you both this morning.
Good morning.
All right, let's kick off with, well, it's on like most of the front pages this morning. Fraser, Michael Gove announcing his... I tell you what's interesting, because he's saying he's going, and yet on the front of The Guardian, they've got a piece about how people are wanting to spend money on Michael Gove's seat because he's in danger of losing it.
Well, he certainly is.
Well, he is now.
He is personally, yeah.
I think, like many Tory MPs, probably jumped before he was pushed by the electorate. But this is very significant. Michael Gove, extremely important minister. He's held a number of ministerial roles under 4 different prime ministers. Perhaps most significantly, Education Secretary. I think, even his critics would have to acknowledge that he played an extremely important role in reforming British education, or English education, I should say. Probably one of the few achievements of this Conservative government has been to raise educational standards, and England has gone up the rankings globally in terms of education. So he deserves credit for that. I think everyone would say that he is a minister who gets things done. He is effective, even if you disagree with him. So this is a big blow to Sunak. It's a big blow to the Tories in general because, even if they lose the election, we have to think about what comes next, who's going to be a part of the, shadow cabinet team, who's going to be rebuilding the party, reconstituting it for the next election to come. So, yeah, big blow to Sunak. Another big beast leaving, another familiar face exiting the stage who won't be here in the next Parliament.
And that makes 78 with Andrea Leadsom also. I mean, both of them have said it's time for a new generation to sort of invigorate the party. And you just wonder, is there another generation to invigorate the party? Are there going to be leading light figures? Are there going to be interesting figures that in a few years' time you might want to vote for?
I think there will be a few, but really who they are and how many they are is the biggest question. But I think people like Kemi Badenoch is relatively securing her in her majority. At the moment, I think the risk threshold is about 15,000, which is crazy when you think that Labour could overturn that. But anyone over that, which Kemi does have in terms of her seat, other rising stars, middling level, maybe people like Tom Tugendhat, for example, could be an interesting one to watch. But yes, Stephen, as you said, in The Guardian, they've got this kind of donations, record amount of money going to key election target seats to shore up people like Penny Mordaunt as well, who otherwise are at risk and probably still is at risk. But I think the fact that they're still pouring money into Michael Gove's seat shows how much of a shock this election was, even for CCHQ itself. Like, I was speaking to someone close to CCHQ recently who was just saying, well, all of my plans, all of our work is just kind of out of the window now because we didn't even know it was coming to happen. So even the Conservative Party is not prepared for this election because Rishi Sunak has kept it so close to his chest.
Yeah. It's interesting that Gove is seen to be one of the people who was encouraging Rishi Sunak to go for an early election. He made this, great speech saying, who dares wins. I'm not sure that applies in Rishi Sunak's case, as we'll find out in a few weeks. But, you know, he was encouraging this election and then has quit quite spectacularly.
That doesn't sound like Michael Gove to encourage someone to do something and then to, like, not follow through.
Very
harsh.
That's the other side of Gove. He is seen as a sort of very Machiavellian figure.
He's very... he's like the Tories' Peter Mandelson, isn't he?
Yes. Kingmaker in many ways.
Absolutely. And I think in some ways he's... As Fraser was saying, he is a reformist MP, and when he goes into a department, he does get to the bottom of things. He works with the civil servants as well. He doesn't just battle them. So it is a you know.
But he's also somebody with another life as well. I mean, he didn't just do politics. I mean, he's a journalist. He's a writer. There are even rumours that he's going to go and edit the Times or something. I don't know what. But maybe. I mean, you can imagine that once the election was announced, he went home and thought seriously, and his phone probably rang a lot. And he spoke to mates who maybe have nice jobs for him lined up. Who knows?
I don't think it's the last we'll have seen of him.
No, that's for sure. I'm intrigued. The Telegraph, Cindy, is one of the papers going on there. The Chancellor saying inheritance tax is unfair and profoundly anti-conservative. A lot of people sort of cheer at hearing that, in a way. The British public don't like the tax, even if it doesn't apply to them. What strikes me with this is that if it's so profoundly anti-conservative, why leave it till 6 weeks before an election before you say that?
It's a very good point, Stephen. And in that interview with The Telegraph, he also talks about how income tax should be cut and how the housing market should be stimulated to help first-time buyers. These are all things that you, as Chancellor, could have done in the last 2 years.
Yes, but people say things in an election campaign that they have obviously not been able to say while they held office.
But it's not credible to say that when you're the incumbent Chancellor. And so, you know, my initial reaction reading this is thinking, well, you've had a lot of time to do this, and if you haven't, there are real reasons not to do them. So what makes post-election different?
Yes, why will suddenly be able to do it?
Absolutely.
And I think one of the reasons why, or one theory as to why, you know, this election was called early was precisely because there might not have been the fiscal headroom to give away, you know, for more tax giveaways. People would have expected, I mean, many of us were thinking that the election will come in the autumn because then there'll be another sort of mini budget. There'll be a chance for, you know, another reduction in national insurance, maybe a change to inheritance tax, a nice big giveaway to remind you, you know, that the government's on your side or whatever. But people think that perhaps that wasn't going to be possible in this current state.
Well, now he may well feel miffed that he's been robbed of that chance to do that.
Perhaps, yes.
Meanwhile, the Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, is imploring Daily Mail readers, of all people, to vote for them, saying that she says, I feel I can say to Mail readers that your natural home is now the Labour Party.
I mean, that's
quite something,
it is interesting.
isn't it?
I mean, so the thing that Rachel Reeves is trying to emphasise is sound money. She's saying we're not going to... You know, depending on what audience this is for, we're not going to be reckless and splash the cash with your finances, but it's also lowering expectations a little bit for anyone who thinks there's going to be any kind of radical economic change.
Well, she even writes the words in this, Margaret Thatcher. She says, let's look back at the 1980s. Margaret Thatcher proclaimed that the Conservatives were the party of sound money.
Yes.
And she keeps using that phrase throughout her piece. And the Daily Mail has given her this enormous exclusive front page and inside, which means what?
Well, I think this has been one of the key themes of Rachel Reeves for the past few years, I think. She's basically emphasised that they're going to stick to the Tories' spending plans pretty much, give or take a few billion here and there. There's not going to be, you know, lots of money to spend on shiny new public services. This is going to be very different from the new Labour period. I mean, to a certain extent, even Rachel Reeves has said that the sort of fiscal rules that Jeremy Hunt is abiding by should be enshrined in law, not just something, you know, not just a piece of advice that the Chancellor can follow. So they're very determined to say that, you know, they are going to be even more disciplined when it comes to the public finances than the Tories. It's part of, I suppose, the broader approach is just caution. You know, Labour wants to do anything like frighten the horses.
The Daily Mail is now saying to its readers, we're backing the Labour Party?
I'm not sure they're going that far, but they are certainly very open-minded, aren't they?
They're tiptoeing in that direction.
Yes, absolutely. And then early in the week as well with the election coverage, it also didn't seem super supportive of the Conservative Party. And I think that's a really big moment. You know, before Blair won in 1997, a lot of the right-leaning papers were starting to come out, at least being open-minded towards him. You know, we know that Blair had a great relationship with Rupert Murdoch at the time. So really winning these papers around is an important sign of what the papers think their readers will want to read and what the papers think the party will bring. And Rachel Reeves, it's fascinating, this Iron Lady kind of reputation she's trying to build for herself. You know, Anne, you mentioned there, she mentioned Thatcher. Look at the Labour Party launch video for the election, and you've got Rachel Reeves in this kind of dark power suit walking up to the Bank of England, really reminding people that she's a safe pair of hands. Very, very different to Corbyn's Labour.
Yeah.
Very, very,
but
very
it's
different.
fascinating because like, where are the people asking the questions of Rachel Reeves? Sound economic strategy. Well, a lot of it seems to be based on how they're going to fund everything. It seems to be based on taxes that people don't have to pay.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think whatever happens next election, taxes are probably going to go up even more because, frankly, the country has no money for a lot of the things that we need to start paying for. But that's Jeremy Hunt's point as well from last week when he got the Treasury to analyse this, I think it was a £38 billion black hole in Labour's accounts. But to be honest, you know, we've just been talking about Jeremy Hunt. I don't see the Conservatives doing that much better. So no. I think voters are in a state of, well, let's see how much better Labour can do it, and it surely can't be worse than currently is.
And I think, just to pick up on what you were saying earlier, Cindy, about the readers, you know, where are the male readers at? I'm not sure they are all going into the Labour column, but I think, you know, if they were going to be reading a paper that's going to be tub-thumping for Rishi Sunak, I think they would stop buying it because, you know, that's not where people are, and that's not where even many loyal Tory voters are. It's not...
No, but it's interesting, isn't it, as to how you make the decision. Are people going towards Labour or towards reform?
Yeah, that's very true. It seems as if, perhaps because of Nigel Farage's announcement that he's not going to be standing, that I think has weakened reform quite significantly.
What do you make? Can I ask you about that? Because we had Ben Habib on yesterday, the deputy leader of Reform, and said about Nigel's decision. And because, of course, Nigel said on GB News the night before, you know, I was thinking I've got everything in place to launch my campaign next week. So Ben Habib said, well, I knew nothing about that, and I'm the deputy leader of the party. I didn't know he was planning to launch a campaign next week, and was really very dismissive of what Nigel was saying. And I wonder if that's trouble at mill.
Yeah, that is really interesting, isn't it? I mean, I think if there's one thing that the Conservatives have done right with launching the election early, is wrong-footing reform. You know, otherwise reform would have been a massive threat. I mean, it probably still is a big threat to be considered, considering they're still climbing in the polls. But the fact that you can basically wrong-foot Nigel Farage and make him say that he's not going to run, I mean, if the plans were that planned out, he probably wouldn't have said he's not running, so he probably would just be running now anyway. Yeah. But I think it's not just Nigel Farage, but reform candidates in other parts of the country who aren't prepared enough or selected. And I think the Conservatives have managed to see off that threat relatively effectively.
Although it seems like there are many Tory candidates who aren't in place.
Yeah,
so I think there's 100 candidates, 100 seats where they don't have candidates in place.
Which isn't a lot of time to do campaigning.
Yeah.
Away from the election, have you been watching the Post Office inquiry? Because I have. I've been glued to it almost.
And you need to tell me about this, not as closely as you've been watching it.
Well, I think if I were a sub-postmaster or sub-postmaster who'd been treated particularly badly and had lost everything and heart was broken, let alone lives and all the rest of it, I would have been pretty angry at watching Paula Venables burst into tears at least 3 or 4 times every day of her testimony. And you couldn't... At the beginning, I felt sympathetic towards it because nobody likes to see anyone pilloried. But for her to say, I loved my job at the post office, I loved it, very tearfully. And I thought, what about the sub-postmasters and mistresses who loved their post offices and who loved the people that they were dealing with and were robbed of that? I don't know, I've been watching it feeling quite angry. What about you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, she's been under incredible grilling as well, hasn't she? I think it's Jason Beers, the KC, has been really kind of forensically going through her email.
Very calmly so.
Yeah. Absolutely. I don't know if any of us would like our emails gone through like that.
No.
But as you say, Anne, you know, she made a massive mistake. And if the emails are right, and if the interpretation that Jason Beers is giving is right, it suggests that she has known about this for over a decade and did very little about it, considering she was in such a position of power.
But what's her line then? Is it still, well, nobody told me?
Yes, absolutely.
Consistently so.
I don't remember that email saying that. I don't remember this being raising
I don't recall, I think.
Yeah, and that's when you could hear the whole room snigger. But Casey has made the point is, how come your memory is so poor when it's anything to do with you and possibly your fault? But it's very clear when you're pointing the finger at somebody else.
Yeah.
And that was deathly.
Yeah, and also trying to paint this image of her as caring about the post office's reputation more than people's lives, which emails are seeming to suggest as well.
Yeah, interesting. OK, Fraser, Cindy, thank you both very much indeed. We'll see you in about 45 minutes.
Brilliant.
So get your pens out ready, make a few more notes.
Yeah, go and have some coffee, read the papers, and meanwhile we'll find out. Apparently it's going to be a really nice weekend weather-wise.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning. Here's your latest GB News weather forecast brought to you by the Met Office. It's fair to say the weather this weekend is going to be pretty messy. However, today actually looks largely dry for many of us because there's a relatively slack flow across the country at the moment, though there are some systems waiting out towards the west and the east, which are going to bring some rain later. But for the time being, a bit of a chilly start because we had some clear skies overnight. That does mean quite a bit of sunshine this morning. However, we are going to see a bit more cloud bubbling up as we go into the afternoon, and there will be some showers around, most of us avoiding these, but towards eastern areas, East Anglia, Lincolnshire, we are going to see a bit of rain pushing its way in as we go through the afternoon. In any sunshine, it's going to feel pleasantly warm. Temperatures a touch higher than yesterday, highs of around 22 or 23 Celsius. It is going to turn pretty wet as we go through this evening and overnight. We have some rain across northern and eastern parts, and then a swathe of wet weather feeding its way up from the southwest. Could see some heavy bursts as that pushes its way northeastwards across many parts. Because of the cloud and the rain, temperatures aren't going to drop a huge amount, so it's going to be a milder start to the day tomorrow than it was this morning. It is also going to be quite a cloudy and at times wet picture. Most of us will see some rain at times. Showery outbreaks to start off with, and then plenty of showers developing as we go towards lunchtime and the afternoon. Some of these could pack quite a punch. Some torrential downpours are possible, as well as some hail and some thunder. There will be some sunny spells in between the showers though, and in any of these it should still feel warm enough, even though temperatures are down a couple of degrees compared to today. A quick look to Bank Holiday Monday, and after an initially dry start in the east, it's
the next Great British Giveaway winner could be you, with a massive £20,000 in tax-free cash to be won. Imagine how you'd react getting that winning call from us.
Oh my God, are you joking?
Not a line, what is it? I've never won a penny in my life.
I don't know what to say.
Do you know what? I've never won anything like this in my life. Oh my God. Oh God. Oh, it shocked me.
This is amazing.
For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text PRIZE to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning to you. It's 7 o'clock on Saturday, the 25th of May. Today, Tory grandees Michael Gove and Andrea Leadsom stand down as MPs at the next election as the Prime Minister is set to spend the weekend locked in meetings.
The Chancellor, meanwhile, Jeremy Hunt, claims that inheritance tax goes against Tory values, with promises to put tax breaks for the middle classes at the heart of the Tory manifesto.
Russia says it's ready to cease fire in Ukraine if the West recognises the current battlefield lines.
And elsewhere, Sarah Ferguson, Duchess of York, furiously silences an audience at the Cannes Film Festival before launching into a speech about climate change, leaving the crowd, well, a little confused.
Everyone in this room, stop. Stop. Stop. Stop. Did you see? I removed the microphone. Because all of you are saying, oh, I want to go, because where is the next party?
Look at me. Finally, should under-16s be smartphone-free? A report from MPs suggesting teens should be banned from owning smartphones. We'll debate that later.
It's a Manchester Derby FA Cup final for the second successive year. We'll have all the build-up ahead of City v United at Wembley. North of the border, meanwhile, there's a first Old Firm Scottish Cup final clash in 22 years, with Celtic facing deadly rivals Rangers at Hampden Park.
You may want to make the most of any dry and bright weather around today, because for many of us it is going to be the driest day of the long weekend. I'll have more details coming up.
Morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and you're watching Breakfast and listening to Breakfast on GB News. How are they going to ban smartphones for teenagers? How would you do it? Given that they've got them already.
I don't think it would be that difficult.
You'd have to take them
of things. You'd have to take them off. I mean, it'd take a while to kick in. It wouldn't. But I think it's quite a sensible idea, actually.
Yeah, but that's maybe not the point. It may be a sensible idea, but how are you going to get teenagers to do it, to give them up, to not have them secretly? Some parents are going to say, no, I want my kid to have a smartphone.
Yeah, but interestingly, it's the Education Select Committee saying, and they want manufacturers to make make phones for children that don't have internet capability. Well, they're out there already. Aren't they? I mean, let's be honest, it's just the old ones. You get an old Nokia or something.
I can't see it working, but...
I think it's a very good idea, actually. I think there's a problem. But the thing is...
And 16 is quite an old age to bring it in.
I mean, they're not cheap. So if the parents don't fund them, how many kids under 16 could fund that themselves? Probably not that many.
No. I know, but there are there are a lot of people who think that having access to the internet, having a smartphone that enables you to stay in touch with everybody, is a sort of almost a fundamental human right.
And I think it probably is from a certain age. The concern there is there's some neurologists have said that actually it's changing neural pathways in the brain of people who are getting on smartphones at too young. It's changing how their brain works.
Is, yes. Yeah.
So that's a problem. That is a problem. So maybe an outright ban is the way forward.
But I mean, if you're watching at home and you've got youngsters in the family who have smartphones, would they give them up? Would you be strong enough yourself as a parent or grandparent to make them give them up? Or to deny them a smartphone, or to say from now on I'm not paying the rent on that, or whatever. I don't know.
Well, let us know. gbnews.com/yoursay. I think it's a good topic. We'll debate that later on. And meanwhile, Dame Andrea Leadsom has become the latest MP to announce she's not going to stand at the general election.
And, of course, her announcement came shortly after Michael Gove posted his resignation letter. He said it was time for a new generation to lead.
Well, it's been reported that 78 Tory MPs are now leaving the Commons. That's a post-war record-breaking exodus.
Well, we're going to talk now to the Economic Secretary to the Treasury, Bim Afalami, who joins us now. A very good morning to you. My goodness, it's, 78 now. MPs have said they're not going to stand at the next election, and some very big names amongst them. That is, as they say, rats leaving a sinking ship, isn't it? You can't see it any other way, can you?
I think you can. Well, look, it's a pleasure to be here. Let's talk about some of the people you mentioned. You've still got someone like Michael Gove, fantastic colleague. I work with him closely. But Michael's been in Parliament for almost 20 years. You know, he's in his late 50s. That is a natural thing for people to want to leave Parliament having served for that period of time. There's a large majority of my MPs, of our colleagues in Conservative benches, are standing again. And if you think about somebody like Michael Gove, it's a good time to focus on what he's been able to achieve. We are now a country with the 4th best readers in the world, school children, because of his reforms in education, for example. So, he has been a fantastic colleague. He's achieved a lot. But make no mistake, the vast majority of Conservative MPs are standing again.
Yeah, but the problem is the Prime Minister's saying, that the big argument for voting for him is we stick to the plan. It's time to stick to the plan, keep everything going. But if there's a lot of big names at the top, or certainly, grandees within the party who aren't going to be around, well, you can stick to the plan, but it's going to be run by a whole load of new people.
Again, I think what's important is you have a right blend of experience and freshness, right? I think that's important in any organisation. And we've got that blend. If you take somebody like Jeremy Hunt, who's been in Parliament for almost 20 years, he's standing again, the Chancellor. You've got somebody like me who's only been in Parliament for coming up to 7 years. I'm standing again. That blend is what we've got. We've got a good team. The Prime Minister himself, is young and fresh and dynamic. And in terms of the choice, what's exciting about this election is it's an end to all the speculation for weeks and months before. It's framing the choice for the British people, which is clear. You either have a low-tax, higher-growth, dynamic future, having got through some tough times with COVID and war in Ukraine, energy prices. We've had some tough times, but that's the future that we offer: low-tax, high-growth, dynamic future with a dynamic young leader. Or same old Labour with French-style union laws, putting wages down for people, low growth, high and ineffective interference by the government on the British people, more power for unions, ineffective economic policy, and that's with a leader who doesn't believe anything, Keir Starmer. I think that choice, I'm excited about taking to the country and in my own constituency of Hitchin, of course.
What do you think of Jeremy Hutton suddenly, out of nowhere, sort of talking about inheritance tax and saying it's not very Tory?
Well, I think what the Chancellor was saying is that, of course, we'd like for nobody to pay inheritance tax ever, but that obviously isn't, reality. Taxes are there and things have to be paid for. So I wouldn't sort of take it beyond that. But, we'll come out with our tax plans, in the coming weeks during the campaign.
It's interesting that you talk about the Tories wanting to provide high growth and low tax. What then do you make of the Institute for Fiscal Studies, which has said today that the state of public finances hang over any new government like a dark cloud, and an open and robust discussion about how to tackle it is needed? I mean, they're saying, in effect, whoever takes power on the 5th of July is either going to have to bring in really austere public sector cuts or significant tax rises because we're in such a state with debt.
That I don't think is completely fair, and let me explain why. The IMF, for example, came to London only a couple of weeks, was it even last week or the week before, and explained, as they said, the UK's economy was in a good place. So, I dispute the sort of overall message from the IFS. In relation to public spending in particular, we've been very, very clear about the next Parliament, which is a growth in public spending in real terms, above inflation, every year of the next Parliament. And we set out our plans on how we're going to cut the double taxation on work by cutting national insurance and cut tax for people and have a better environment for small business.
But this is, forgive me, this is what people are going to struggle with, because it sounds great, but you know we know things are tight, and you're saying you're going to increase public spending and reduce taxes. I mean, it just doesn't add up, does it?
I'm afraid it does, because the growth that we are going to put in place, because of our economic strategy, because of our economic plan, means that as the economy grows, that provides more money for all our public services. Because fundamentally, you know, if a Labour politician was on, they'd say, oh, the government's not spending enough on X or not spending enough on Y. But the question is, how are you going to pay for it? The only way you pay for it sustainably, without loading too many taxes on the British people, Labour's plan is to increase spending by £2,000 extra for every family. Our plan is to cut the right taxes to incentivise growing the economy, the right ones, to make sure we grow the economy that puts more money into the pockets of every single person and the public services through higher taxation because people are doing more economic activity. That is the choice. That's the choice before us. Labour can't do what we're suggesting to do because they believe in weighing down small business. With Angela Rayner's plan of 70 new regulations, they believe in weighing down the economy by giving unions huge power in every single workforce, which will mean that we have higher unemployment, French style. You know, that is not our plan. But look, that's what elections are about. We're going to set out our vision and they'll set out theirs. And I'm confident the British people will see that the Conservative option is the right way forward.
And what do you make of Rachel Reeves, of course, the shadow chancellor, actually being not only having her say, as she is today, in a very big article in the Mail, and part of her say is saying that I feel I can say to Mail readers that your natural home is now the Labour Party. You can trust me with your money. It's not just that she's saying it, it's that the Mail has actually given her all of that coverage. Do you think they're changing their loyalties, maybe, towards Labour? And are you worried that that's the very audience you need to stick with you, isn't it?
Well, we want everybody to stick with us on every newspaper across the political spectrum. So, but at the same time, I think in an election campaign, it's fair enough that the Shadow Chancellor gets to make her case. I'm pretty relaxed about that. All I would say to Mail readers, my mother is definitely one, and I hope my mother is up and watching, is, you know, if you believe that, you'll believe anything in relation to Rachel Reeves. This is somebody who went to the last election saying Jeremy Corbyn should be Prime Minister. I don't think that's what Mail readers are going to buy.
Yeah, but when you say, and this is where we need politicians like you to be absolutely upfront and honest, because I think people see through spin now in 2024. When you say you're confident people will look at the economic plans, all the rest of it, and decide to vote Tory, can you genuinely say that when you're 20-plus points behind in the polls? I know there's only one poll that counts, that's what politicians like to say, but nevertheless, with 6 weeks to go, you are so badly trailing.
Look, of course I look at polls. Any politician that says to you they don't look at polls is lying to you. But I looked at polls in my first election in Hitchin in 2017, and it showed Theresa May almost 20 points ahead of Jeremy Corbyn. I thought I'd barely have to campaign. That is not how it turned out. And this is all within our living memory. I'm not spinning you, right? I'm not making that up. We remember it. All I'm saying is I think the British people, when it comes to elections, they're tough. And they will examine what people actually say. They'll examine their record, examine the future. All I'm saying, I think that our record is going to stack up well, and our vision of the future is going to stack up very well against the Labour Party that has not changed, does not really believe in anything, saying whatever they can to get elected, but under scrutiny, they're going to crumble.
OK. Really good to see you this morning, Bim Afalami. I hope Mrs. Afalami, your mum, is watching as well, so yes. Morning to her if she's...
She's not. She's not. She's asleep. She made that very clear.
Oh, right. Oh, well. There you go. Tell her to get up. Good to see you this morning. Thanks very much indeed.
She should have got up to watch you, I'm sure. Anyway, that's
well, I mean, it's interesting. We're going to be talking to his counterpart, a little bit later on this morning.
Is 6 weeks long enough to set out your stall and convince the electorate that you're the one speaking sense?
Yeah, I think we'll have had enough of it by then.
Well, we certainly will.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, earlier on, we spoke to the former Labour advisor, Lauren Bell-Cross, who had this to say on what Jeremy Hunt's been saying about inheritance tax.
I was surprised by how cautious Jeremy Hunt and the Conservatives have been on this, because I would have thought with this announcement now, they've got to go something big and sort of throw a bit of red meat to their activists and say, right, this is a big tax thing that Labour wouldn't dare do, and we're now doing. But then the fact that they're not and trying to say, oh, well, we're steadying the ship, we're being responsible. But if you've been in charge for 14 years, and let's be honest about this, things aren't going great for them when you're 20 points behind in the polls, it's not really a great sell for people, is it? I think what Labour's going to have to put out a fully costed manifesto, and I think they'll do that very, very shortly with all the details of all the funding, particularly I think on issues like Great British Energy, they're going to have an answer for.
Meanwhile, what are the Lib Dems saying? Well, let's take a look at Sir Ed Davies' view on the chances of the Lib Dems taking some seats from the Tory party in the upcoming election.
There are so many seats that have been traditionally Conservative that the Liberal Democrats are the ones who can take off them. And increasingly in the southwest, the West Country, which used to be a stronghold for the Liberal Democrats, we're back there again. We've seen that in the by-election victories in Somerset and Devon. We've seen that in council victories this year in Dorset, last year in Devon, the previous year in Somerset. So across the south of England, I think people realise now if they want to get rid of the Conservatives, they vote Liberal Democrat.
Well, joining us now is political commentator, and I think we do have to mention Suzanne Evans, former UKIP deputy chair, as we're in this election period now. Good to see you this morning. When it comes to the economy, we're in an interesting situation, aren't we, when we have the Shadow Chancellor saying, actually, you're safe with me, that takes a degree of faith. It also takes a degree of faith to believe the Chancellor as well, doesn't it, when he promises great things that he hasn't yet delivered?
Well, I think it was very interesting to hear Bim Afilami just saying now that, you know, voters have a choice in this election. You're either in a low tax, high growth, dynamic future, or the exact opposite with Labour. But I think the problem is that we don't see a low tax, high growth present under the Conservatives for the last, since 2010. That just hasn't happened. So it's all a little bit unbelievable. You know, we're facing a tax burden that's the highest it's been since the Second World War, heading for an 80-year high. Growth is very, very low. I also thought it was interesting. You asked the question, Stephen, about the Institute for Fiscal Studies report, and Bim Afilami responded to that by quoting the IMF, who this week, very interestingly, said Britain isn't taxing people enough. And it particularly said we need higher taxes on inheritance, as well as also saying we should tax drivers more. So there you go. I mean, what's that all about? You can't quote, half a story, if you like. So, and that here we have Jeremy Hunt coming out with inheritance tax idea. Now, that policy, let's make no mistake, would be very popular. You mentioned UKIP. When I was writing the 2015 UKIP manifesto, we did some polling on inheritance tax, and scrapping it was one of the most, it was UKIP policy to scrap it completely. And that was one of the most popular policies we had out there, including, interestingly, among young people who I think saw it as perhaps, given the extent to which house prices have risen, they saw it as the only way of getting on the housing ladder. So yes, it would be a popular policy. But my question to Jeremy Hunt would be, why didn't you do it in your spring budget? There were lots of rumours that you were going to be doing it in your spring budget. I think had you done it then, you would have brought a lot of because I'm an ex-Tory as well, I think you'd have brought a lot of disaffected ex-Tories such as myself back on board. That for me would be a very important policy. I'm a single mum. I have a daughter. I have a home that probably is past that inheritance tax threshold. And she wouldn't be able to live in the house. And I think many people, disaffected Tories, middle-class people, are in that situation. So had he done it back then, I'd have thought, yep, that's it, I'm voting Tory. But it's now just another promise. And as I say, if you've got Bim Afilami quoting the IMF, who's saying we need to tax inheritance more, I'm sorry, it doesn't ring true.
He was also quoting, wasn't he, the fact that at one point Theresa May was so many points ahead in the polls, it looked as though that she would win very well. And then look what happened. You could also tell him, yes, the last time we had this many Tory MPs just abandoning their seats and saying, never, I'm not standing at the next election. Look what happened then with the Tony Blair landslide. I mean, politics can clearly go either way, even in only 6 weeks of an election run-up.
They say a week is a long time in politics. I think in an election campaign, 24 hours is a long time in politics. So yes, we have a situation. We've got 78 Conservative MPs saying they're not going to stand again. That is more now than stood down when the writing was on the wall and Tony Blair swept to power with a massive majority in 1997. So yes, but anything can happen. He mentioned Theresa May. Indeed, what happened then? Theresa May really lost the campaign, didn't she? In that terrible interview, nothing has changed. And from that on, she became portrayed as a sort of automaton that didn't really have an emotional grip of what people wanted. So the same thing could indeed happen again. And of course, it could happen to Keir Starmer as well. One major mistake, anything could happen. Was the GB News poll, wasn't it, yesterday? 51% of voters still undecided, really. Nobody's quite sure who they're going to vote for. There's everything to play.
Yeah, which is interesting when you look at what's happening to reform at the moment. Nigel Farage saying he thinks the election's been called because he was planning to stand. Reform itself saying we had no idea he was planning to launch an election campaign. I mean, to be frank, from a party which has seemed to have quite a lot of cohesion, it seems to be coming away at the edges a little bit at the moment.
It's always very difficult, I think, for insurgent parties to be able to get the kind of coordination together that the big parties, Tory, Labour, the Lib Dems, have been working on for decades. Running a political party is a really, really, really big job. It's really like running a big corporation, with the added difficulty that most of the people that you're working with are volunteers. So they're not kind of paid staff. And of course, we've also, this is the other interesting thing I think about this general election campaign, is because we've got so many Conservative MPs standing down, there's a kind of scramble even to find candidates for the Conservative Party. And I'm hearing a lot of rumours about discontent in local parties, that candidates are being parachuted in, and it's kind of seen as the Tory candidates are being foisted on constituencies, and it's the cronies who are being appointed rather than people that the locals have chosen and local associations have chosen. So if that's a problem for the Conservatives, imagine how much more of a problem that's going to be for parties like Reform, who are much smaller to start with, haven't got that overall organisation and strategy that's been there for decades. How much more difficult it's going to be for them to find a cohesive way to campaign and to get those candidates in place.
OK, Suzanne, really good to see you. Thank you.
Yeah, it's interesting. Wasn't it Neil Kinnock who said that the electorate may know that they're fed up with the Tories, but they haven't fallen in love with Keir Starmer yet? Do you have to fall in love with a leader to vote for them? Don't know. I
don't know. I mean, it's that old thing, isn't it, of effectively saying if Labour keeps their head down, there'll be it's Starmer's to lose, if you believe the polls. So will he make a big mistake, oddly, like Neil Kinnock did?
Yes.
In that "ooh, yay" speech that he did, that actually just put the voters off.
Yeah.
Anyway, we shall see in another 6 weeks.
Absolutely, that's for sure. And I mean, and we've all been belly aching for months and months and months, haven't we, about when are they going to call an election? Let them get on with it. Well, now they have, so we can't moan about that, can we?
No. 7:23. Let's have a look at some of the other stories heading into our newsroom this morning.
Well, the former boss of the post office has been accused of living in La La Land over her role in the Horizon scandal. That's Paula Venables, and she again became emotional on the third day of giving evidence. She admitted making mistakes and accepted there was no one else to blame, but claimed she didn't know why important information didn't reach her.
The Italian teenager Carlo Acutis, who died of leukemia, is set to become the Catholic Church's first millennial saint. Pope Francis has attributed 2 miracles to the youngster, one of which involved him healing a university student in Florence. Carlo, when he was alive, used his computer skills to spread the Catholic faith. He died when he was 15.
The documentary filmmaker Morgan Spurlock has died at the age of 53. He came to prominence with his Oscar-nominated film Supersize Me. That was in 2004, and it tracked his health, if you remember, whilst he ate nothing but McDonald's for a month. The film was credited with prompting a broad conversation about how fast food and rising obesity was impacting us all. Mr. Spurlock passed away in New York due to complications from cancer.
I think it's real shock, that, about Morgan Spurlock.
He's very young. But
very young, and he was
cancer.
one of those, everybody knows the name. It's one of those. So that's really...
And it's certainly, his film did spur an absolute, it changed the narrative, I think, on the way a lot of us think about fast food.
Yeah.
It was a fascinating way to do it as well, wasn't it? Really unusual.
Yeah, not a bad way to do it.
But it turned out not to be very good, did it? Because he became very unhealthy over a month of it. But he ate nothing but. I mean, nobody does that, do they?
Well, I hope not. I hope not. Right, let's see what the weather's going to do, and let's hope it's a nice one. Here's Alex.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning. Here's your latest GB News weather forecast, brought to you by the Met Office. It's fair to say the weather this weekend is going to be pretty messy. However, today actually looks largely dry for many of us because there's a relatively slack flow across the country at the moment, though there are some systems waiting out towards the west and the east, which are going to bring some rain later. But for the time being, a bit of a chilly start because we had some clear skies overnight. That does mean quite a bit of sunshine this morning. However, we are going to see a bit more cloud bubbling up as we go into the afternoon, and there will be some showers around, most of us avoiding these, but towards eastern areas, East Anglia, Lincolnshire, we are going to see a bit of rain pushing its way in as we go through the afternoon. In any sunshine, it's going to feel pleasantly warm. Temperatures a touch higher than yesterday, highs of around 22 or 23 Celsius. It is going to turn pretty wet as we go through this evening and overnight. We have some rain across northern and eastern parts, and then a swathe of wet weather feeding its way up from the southwest. Could see some heavy bursts as that pushes its way northeastwards across many parts. Because of the cloud and the rain, temperatures aren't going to drop a huge amount, so it's going to be a milder start to the day tomorrow than it was this morning. It is also going to be quite a cloudy and at times wet picture. Most of us will see some rain at times. Showery outbreaks to start off with, and then plenty of showers developing as we go towards lunchtime and the afternoon. Some of these could pack quite a punch. Some torrential downpours are possible, as well as some hail and some thunder. There will be some sunny spells in between the showers though, and in any of these it should still feel warm enough, even though temperatures are down a couple of degrees compared to today. A quick look to Bank Holiday Monday, and after an initially dry start in the east, it's going to be another largely cloudy picture for many. Further outbreaks of showery rain. Again, these could be a little bit heavy at times, but there are some signs that we could see something a little bit drier developing towards western and southwestern parts as we go through the afternoon. Temperatures, though, down a little bit compared to tomorrow. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Weather-wise, it's almost like it's bad luck to say the words Bank Holiday Monday.
Yes. Yes, I agree.
Because it doesn't look good.
To be fair, I'd forgotten it was a Bank Holiday Monday.
It is.
But there you go. But it is, so
you can have a lion.
And I'm not having to work.
You can have a lion.
So there you go.
Yeah.
I shall refuse to work if they ask me now. There you go, in case they're listening.
You've gone on record. Shall we get on with our wonderful Great British giveaway? £20,000 has to be won. Don't miss out, because lines are going to close this coming Friday. So here's all the details you need for your chance to win all that cash.
It's the final week to see how you can win a whopping £20,000 cash. And because it's totally tax-free, every single penny will be in your bank account to do whatever you like with. £20,000 in tax-free cash really could be yours this summer. Hurry, as lines close on Friday. You've got to be in it to win it. For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Well, Welsh farmer Gareth Wyn-Jones is a first-language Welsh speaker and joins us now. Gareth, I mean, a lot of people will be thinking, hang on, this guy is a Welsh teacher. He speaks English. He knew what was on the parking ticket. He's just trying to make a point. He's being a prat, isn't he?
No, hey, come on, mate. I'm a first language Welsh. It's important that we watch after our language and, you know, that everything's bilingual. For us in Wales, you wouldn't go to France and expect your ticket to be in English, would you? You know, English is the most spoken language, but let's watch after these small languages. It's part of our cultural. So, you know what, I take my hat off to the guy. Fair play to him to go out and to fight this. But what it's done is put it onto the mainstream media, and you're talking about it, even that you're calling him that. You know, at least we're having a discussion about it, and it's putting the Welsh language in the forefront. And,
so,
you know,
Gareth,
speaking Welsh is important.
Yeah, so Gareth, this is a matter of principle. Is there a sense that the Welsh language is being eradicated in Wales? Is this something that the Welsh people need to rise up against?
Well, Welsh government are trying to, you know, bring a lot more Welsh speaking into our daily life and teach people how to speak Welsh. Well, everything should be bilingual then. And I think, you know, it should start with government. So government should be putting pressure on these companies to make sure everything is bilingual. So I get behind this guy. Fair play to him. It's a good stance, and it puts it in the public eye. Let's have everything in both languages, especially Welsh, because that's my first language. And I'm
you know what? If I was Welsh, if I were Welsh, I think I would agree with you. I think I would agree with you, Gareth.
It depends if you come from Wrexham.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's Newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do.
His comedy, though, is revolting. I knew her, unlike you. That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frothy in here, isn't it?
He'll have one of me one day.
For dartball practice. Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel. GB News, Britain's news channel.
7:32, good morning to you. Now, a select committee has recommended that the next government, whoever it should be, should enforce a ban on smartphones for anyone who's under 16.
It's also suggested that tough guidance is needed because of the harm that these smartphones particularly can have on children's mental health.
Well, let's talk to parenting specialist Kirsty Ketley and psychologist Catherine Hallisey. Good to see you both this morning. Kirsty, what would you reckon to that? As a parenting expert, isn't it the right thing to do to safeguard children?
Absolutely, and I don't necessarily disagree with a ban. I just worry how I'm a bit sceptical of how that would actually work, how it would be enforced. I think there would be many parents and children breaking the rules on that. And for me, particularly in my work, it's really important that parents understand how smartphones work, how smart technology works. We're living in 2024. The world is full of smart technology. Kids are surrounded by it. And often when I'm dealing with parents and they're having issues with their child and smartphones, it's a lot to do with, a lack of rules and boundaries, a lack of education on, parents aren't so savvy as as to how smartphones work. A lot of parents don't even know how to use their own smartphone in a safe way. And I think it's more about educating parents and children about being safe online, about being safe with a smartphone, rather than just taking it away, because you're still going to have those issues when they get to 14 or when they get to 16. So it's about teaching them how to use them in a responsible way and being really strict with your rules and boundaries. I think, parents and grown-ups are just as addicted to phones as children, if not more so. Spend a lot of time with phones in their hands. As role models, we should be role modelling how to use our phones in a responsible way. You see whole families out for meals and they're all sat, texting or watching stuff on phones. We need to take more of a responsibility, I think, as parents in how we dish out a smartphone to your child. You've got to really think about it before you give your child a phone. You've got to be savvy and you've got to be really strict with your rules and boundaries about how that phone is used. And if your child breaks those rules and boundaries, there has to be consequences, i.e. it's taken away for a period of time. And they have to show you that, they can be trusted to have one.
Catherine, do you think it's at all practical, the idea of stopping youngsters using smartphones? And for those who are already using them, and apparently they really are, it's going to be a question of taking them off them. Can it be done?
Well, I think it can be done because there are some communities that have done this already and have done this successfully. And I've been involved with a number of communities where parents have gotten together and set up a voluntary smartphone code that parents can voluntarily sign up to, where they agree not to buy their child a smartphone before a certain age. And what we're doing with that is taking what's a collective problem and coming up with a collective solution. So rather than if you were currently taking the decision that your child doesn't get a smartphone until 14, they may actually be the only one. And that will have massive social consequences for them. Whereas if they are, just one of many that doesn't have a smartphone, it really levels that playing field and it makes it much easier to stick to your own parenting values rather than doing it because you're afraid of your child missing out.
That's a key point, Kirsty, isn't it? I mean,
yes.
if you ban them for everybody, it takes away having to educate the parents and educating the children in the same way. Because this isn't just about being safe online, is it? It's about the way being glued to a phone changes your brain during key developmental stages.
Absolutely, and I definitely don't disagree at all with Catherine. I've seen those things happen at all as well. So where parents all collectively come together, I'm in a situation at the moment where my 11-year-old's off to senior school in September. She is one of a few now in her class and her year group in year 6 who does not have a phone at all. And of course, there's been severe FOMO that she's missing out on something, but, we just don't feel she needs a phone at the moment. And, you do as a parent, you feel bad, you feel guilty, and it'd be great if all the parents had said, yeah, that's it, they're not going to have a phone, because it would make it easier for me as a parent. But I still think that she probably will end up with a phone by the time she goes off to senior school, and it probably will be a smartphone. But there's going to be very strict rules and boundaries in place, and that's where parents could all come together and have the same rules and boundaries around phone usage. So again, collectively coming together, which I do think is a really great idea, but having exactly the same rules and boundaries, that phones are taken away in the evening, they're put, locked away, they're out in the mornings, they're not all on social media before they should be. But I also think, touching on social media, the tech companies need to be much more involved in all this as well. So social media shouldn't be so accessible for children. Age 13 is still very young to be going onto social media. Why isn't it 16 or older? What are the tech companies going to be doing about that as well? Why is it all the parents' responsibility? It should be a collective thing, I think.
Look, we'd love to talk to you longer, but because this is a fascinating one and it's not going to go away, so I'm sure we'll be talking about it again in the future. For the moment, Kirsty and Catherine, thank you very much indeed. I suppose you could say if your child is the one without the phone, at least they can't be cyberbullied about not having a phone.
True. I tell you what struck me, and I'm sure, Kirsty talks a lot of sense, I'm sure. But if you have to say, well, we need, parents need to be educated and tech companies need to take responsibility, if you remove the phone, it gets away. You remove all those problems.
Well, and as you were saying earlier, that it's not as if it's cheap to have one of those phones.
No.
They're expensive. So if you refuse to pay for it, then there's no way a child is going to be able to afford one themselves.
It's the way forward. But anyway, let us know what you think. gbnews.com/yoursay.
Still to come, Aidan McGee will be here because it's a very big day sports-wise. Manchester United, Manchester City, that's next.
Britain's Newsroom. Weekday mornings from 9:30.
Well, we're delighted about this because the boss of JD Wetherspoon has credited demand for fashionable Guinness as the pub chain reported a jump in sales.
Now, Guinness has benefited from a boom in demand over recent years, shaking off its association with rugby lads and old men to appeal to a much younger audience and loads more women.
We've got our Guinness here.
Oh, yeah.
Cheers to you.
Cheers.
I'm not sure about this boozing on air at this time of the morning, but I'll let you off on this occasion.
As it's you, Tim, as it's you. Now, Guinness is an acquired taste for many people, so I'm surprised it's become so popular.
Yes, it is a real surprise. I think it's always been a popular drink among the demographic you mentioned, the older guy. There's about 80 or 90% of pub trade over the last 30 or 40 years, and probably longer, are a similar range of products. But there's a varying 10, 20% according to fashion. You had vodka Red Bull 20 years ago. You had an Irish cider poured over ice, which came from no one knows where. You had Alco Pops. So there's an unpredictable range of products which have been the fashion of the moment. But the fashion of the moment, very unpredictably this time, is Guinness. And no one knows why. As you say, it's an acquired taste. Young people tend not to like it. Most of the fashionable drinks over the decades have been quite sweet. And Guinness obviously isn't. So, yes, I think the Guinness brewery, St James's Gate in Dublin, they'll say it's brilliant marketing. But like the rest of us, they rely a bit on luck.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Aidan's here with all the sport because it's FA Cup final day. Manchester derby, yet again?
Yeah, another one for the second year running. And I don't recall a time when, I mean, you know, for context, the Daily Mirror are saying that Manchester United could pull off a shock for the ages. I don't ever remember Manchester United being involved in any game in the history of time where a win for them could be called a shock for the ages. They were the dominant team for me growing up. Wow. Even last year they were in a decent shape going into the final.
Which doesn't that mean Ten Hag is going to get fired whether they win or lose?
Look, I can't see any other outcome right now, Stephen. And to be honest with you, you said that a few weeks ago, didn't you? And I wasn't sure. But listen, we're going to cross to Manchester Live now to Sophie Reaper, who is charting all the build-up to us as fans make their way to Wembley early doors. Sophie.
Good morning to you all. Well, we're here now with the City coaches, which are just about to depart off down to Wembley. We've seen hundreds of fans boarding these coaches this morning. They are just about to leave. Of course, kick off at 3, so they'll be getting down nice and early to make sure they take in the atmosphere. We were with United fans this morning who'll be doing similar. Thousands of Reds and Blues travelling down for the FA Cup final today. Of course, it is a huge day in the calendar for Manchester United and Manchester City fans. Now, I looked this up this morning. This is the 193rd time United and City will play each other in a competitive fixture. But interestingly, although in recent years it's been City who've had more success, in obviously City last weekend taking the league title, it's actually Manchester United who have won the derby more times. 78 times United have won the derby against City, but I'm sure this time we just don't know. Of course, what you were saying there, last year it was City who took the FA Cup title, snatched it out of the United's jaws 2-1 with those Ilkay Gundogan goals, and I'm sure this year we could see similar drama. It's always tense in Wembley as they go for that silverware. We'll be bringing you all the latest from Manchester throughout the day.
Thanks very much indeed to you, Sophie. Hopefully no travel disruption for those fans making their way from Manchester to London. And for those who don't know what an FA Cup final ticket looks like, because I like gold dust near enough every year, I have a picture of one because I'm going myself to the game. I got an offer yesterday that I couldn't refuse, and I managed to work it in with my schedule.
Oh, you couldn't refuse it?
I couldn't refuse it. No. Well, I know a friend of mine wanted some decent company at the final.
Of course.
How can I tell you?
It's your duty to be there.
It only cost 145 quid.
Whoa!
It was like a cup final. You'd pay double that to go, wouldn't you?
No.
Actually, I wouldn't mind going to a cup final.
Yeah,
really?
Yeah.
It's a quintessentially British event, isn't it?
Yeah.
Exactly.
I love it when you see the coaches coming down the motorway and everybody's got their scarves hanging out the window.
Yeah, I know.
It's lovely.
And their bottoms pressed against the back.
Yes, well, that's a slightly unfortunate
that's my coach.
Always away, yeah. Aidan, thanks very much indeed. See you a little bit later on. We've got the papers heading away in just a couple of minutes with Cindy Yu and Fraser Myers.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
He's meeting his father, the King, for just the second time since his father's cancer diagnosis. Harry's going to an Invictus Games gig at St Paul's on Wednesday, and his father is hosting a garden party at Buckingham Palace. Once they're all said and done, about 7 p.m, they are going to meet, apparently.
Yeah,
but
wonderful.
crucially not the Princess of Wales.
Well, I think it's a wonderful story, and obviously you would. If you're visiting the country, you haven't seen your dad and he's ill with cancer, of course you would go grab a Costa. Can't wait to see the pictures of them in Costa together, just having a little catch-up.
Do you think they might embrace?
I would hope so, but...
Do you know, I think it's really important that life's too short not to have a relationship with your family. I know too many people that aren't speaking, or they've fallen out because of money or whatever, and we're only on this earth for a very short time, and what a shame not to have a relationship with your own
haven't they?
son.
I mean, it's the trust issue that is really the problem here, and straight after this they're going to be heading off to Nigeria, and they're still involved in all of these sort of like commercial and media activities. If you don't have that trust there with your family, and you're responsible for breaking that trust down, it's not really, it's sort of on you, isn't it?
It's still mendable, though, I think, and we've all got people in our family that maybe we wouldn't trust with our bank details or something like that, so they can just not. You know, Charles shouldn't be going to Harry, guess what, you can't tell anyone. He's like, that's not what they're going to talk about, are they? They're not going to tell him anything.
The King is his father, but it's different, isn't it, if it's your brother, it's your sibling, whereas a father's probably perhaps more likely to be forgiving and to be wanting to sort of reunite. Do you think maybe it's going to be harder for him to mend that relationship with William and Catherine?
I think it's really, really hard. I mean, I can't see how they can... But they need to get in a room together. They need to speak. The only way that you are going to break down barriers when it comes to relationships is by facing it and speaking about it.
You say life's too short, but some would say, well, that's a perfect reason not to tolerate any nonsense.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and, of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Gloria Di Piero.
This is GB News, Britain's election channel.
Sunday nights on GB News. From 6, Neil Oliver. At 7, it's Free Speech Nation with Andrew Doyle. At 9, Mark Dolan. And at 11, get set for the week ahead with headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
7:49. Let's have a look through the papers with Cindy Yu from The Spectator and Fraser Myers from Spike. Good to see you both this morning. Fraser, let's start with the eye, should we? No surprise, Jeremy Corbyn's been officially thrown out of the Labour Party.
Yeah, so Jeremy Corbyn, the former Labour leader, had been suspended a while ago because he said that, you know, the accusations of anti-Semitism during his tenure at the Labour Party were wildly exaggerated. Now he's officially been expelled because he is going to stand as an independent, so he's effectively running against Labour. I mean, it's interesting, he's saying he's standing on a platform of peace and social justice. Now, we might want to think about who else he's described as a movement for peace and social justice. Famously, these are words that he used about Hamas, the anti-Semitic genocidal terror group. And, you know, his record on this particular issue is absolutely disgraceful. Even after the 7th of October, he went and appeared on Piers Morgan's show, and he refused. After 15 times he was asked, do you consider Hamas to be a terrorist group? And he refused to answer the question. So I think, you know... Yeah,
but he's got a huge majority, very popular.
He's very popular locally. I think he is a good local MP. Yeah. There's no question about that. He cares very deeply about his constituents. But I think that the sort of, I don't know, this idea that he is a principled, kindly, on the right side of history, I think that idea has now been totally exploded.
Yeah, but I don't know whether that would change. Has it? If you were living in Islington in his constituency and you've always voted for him, how much is it because of him? How much is it because of the Labour ticket?
Yeah.
There's going to be a tremendous loyalty towards him.
Independents normally don't find it easy when they run by themselves after leaving an established party, even when they're the incumbent MP. I think it depends on where he gets his votes from. Like, if he gets them from Labour Party and Labour voters, then that will also diminish a Labour vote and he could get in. But if he's getting them from other parties, like the Green Party or others in the constituency, then the Labour force will still be reckoned with.
He's still going to be a thorn in the side of Keir Starmer every time either one of them stand up to make a speech, isn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. But maybe if he doesn't win this election, you know, that could be the end of Jeremy Corbyn on frontline politics.
I can't see him losing it. I just know that he's very well thought of in that constituency.
Yeah, he has got such name recognition as well, and he is a good local MP. There's no question about that. It's just, you know, I think that he is not the saviour of the British left, as some people make him out to be.
Yeah. Cindy, on the front of The Guardian this morning, Tory donors forking out millions of pounds to try to keep the party afloat.
Yeah, more than £2.5 million. And this comes after the Conservatives last year basically rammed through a higher limit on how much parties can spend. And mostly this is going to benefit the Conservative Party. One, because their donors are more rich, and secondly, because they are on the back foot, so Labour doesn't have to campaign as much. And often these have been kind of funnelled into the key marginals where, well, most seats are marginal these days. But the ones with high-profile candidates like Penny Mordaunt, Bim Afellamy, who you spoke to earlier this morning, some of these candidates are raising money themselves. So Bim Afellamy has raised more than £115,000 for his own constituency. And so basically the Conservatives are coming at this with all guns blazing, spending as much money as they can about it. Campaign rules on spending only start 5 weeks into the election.
Right.
Sorry, 5 weeks before the election date, so they start next week. So, which means that in the next few days, they're going to be trying to splash out as much money as possible on digital campaigning, on physical leaflets.
Does it make much of a difference? I don't know.
It's very difficult to tell. I think, you know, certainly at a marginal level, you know, kind of get out the vote operation, having people knock on doors, reminding people that there's an election on, because people do forget, that kind of thing can have a small impact. But really, you know, the Tories are so far behind in the polls. I mean, we still talk today about the Portillo moment at the 1997 election. How many similar moments are there going to be at this election with so many big beasts, so many Tory MPs with large, you know, seemingly safe seats who are at real risk of losing their seats.
And big names too. There are still some big names left.
Still some, a few left.
Just a few. But I mean, the Portillo moment was, I mean, that man was being seen as a potential Prime Minister, wasn't he? And my goodness, what a moment it was.
And you know, Penny Mordaunt's named here. How many times does she come up in talks about the potential next
She's got a decent majority there, hasn't she, Penny?
Not enough.
No?
She's under risk.
Not enough to
the
feel
latest,
safe.
YouGov poll. But I think it's also depending on what kind of campaign they run. How local is it for your MP? Because what we saw in the mayoral elections and local elections was that actually, you know, sometimes the leaflets weren't even blue for the Tory candidates.
Yeah.
They just wanted to be your local representative. So if they distance themselves from the national disaster and say, I have been a good local MP, then that's might be a more effective message.
Just in 30 seconds, why would Starmer be the most dangerous left-wing Prime Minister since the 1970s, according to the Mail?
according to Boris Johnson has said this. He's come up with an excoriating attack on Keir Starmer. I mean, there's some brilliant lines in here. He talks about Starmer wrapping himself so tightly in the Union Jack that he looks like Ginger Spice's leotard in a leotard. I mean, it's full of hyperbole. Everyone knows Keir Starmer's not very left-wing. We're not going to get a socialist government. There's lots of talk of, you know, Venezuela and Vietnam in here. It's, you know, classic Boris Johnson bluster.
Sadly, we're out of time. Fraser, Cindy, thanks very much indeed.
Let's find out.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning. Here's your latest GB News weather forecast brought to you by the Met Office. It's fair to say the weather this weekend is going to be pretty messy. However, today actually looks largely dry for many of us because there's a relatively slack flow across the country at the moment, though there are some systems waiting out towards the west and the east which are going to bring some rain later. But for the time being, a bit of a chilly start because we had some clear skies overnight. That does mean quite a bit of sunshine this morning. However, we are going to see a bit more cloud bubbling up as we go into the afternoon, and there will be some showers around, most of us avoiding these, but towards eastern areas, East Anglia, Lincolnshire, we are going to see a bit of rain pushing its way in as we go through the afternoon. In any sunshine, it's going to feel pleasantly warm. Temperatures a touch higher than yesterday, highs of around 22 or 23 Celsius. It is going to turn pretty wet as we go through this evening and overnight. We have some rain across northern and eastern parts, and then a swathe of wet weather feeding its way up from the southwest. Could see some heavy bursts as that pushes its way northeastwards across many parts. Because of the cloud and the rain, temperatures aren't going to drop a huge amount, so it's going to be a milder start to the day tomorrow than it was this morning. It is also going to be quite a cloudy and at times wet picture. Most of us will see some rain at times. Showery outbreaks to start off with, and then plenty of showers developing as we go towards lunchtime and the afternoon. Some of these could pack quite a punch. Some torrential downpours are possible, as well as some hail and some thunder. There will be some sunny spells in between the showers though, and in any of these it should still feel warm enough, even though temperatures are down a couple of degrees compared to today. A quick look to Bank Holiday Monday, and after an initially dry...
It's the biggest cash prize we've given away to date. An incredible £20,000 that you could use however you like. And because it's totally tax-free, every single penny will be in your bank account to do whatever you like with. £20,000 in tax-free cash really could be yours this summer. Hurry, you've got to be in it to win it. For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text PRIZE to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Have government done enough, do you think, to actually help them out?
I think there will be occasions where people have tried to run a venture, whether it be a pub, a restaurant or anything sort of like that, in the hospitality sector, and it hasn't become commercially viable because of costs, because of bad accounting or because of bad business people. That is just a fact of life. That happens in every sector. So there will be pubs that are closing because they've been poorly run. But I do think there will be occasions where people are forced out of the market. So if local councils aren't being able to pass on business rates, for example, maybe central government can do more. It always tries to do more to cut beer duty and things like that to keep pubs going. So I don't think it's necessarily just as plain as what James is saying, is that, you know, bad pubs will just inevitably be falling by the wayside.
The idea that you two gentlemen, you raging capitalists, support the government stepping in to protect pubs seems to be particularly peculiar. If a pub isn't commercially viable, it has to be allowed to fail.
Well, Sadiq Khan, you know, he has a nighttime czar that he pays well over 100 grand.
Yes.
And businesses are going under like you wouldn't believe in London.
She's a real nightmare.
What's your point?
Well, the point is that Labour aren't exactly helping out these businesses, are they? So
I'm saying that pubs should not be protected by the state. I'm all for a pub.
Well, I'm not suggesting that we subsidise pubs.
Well, that has been suggested. That's what James May is railing against. Although I have to say, it's all very well for James May and presumably his very posh gastropub. But if a pub is not fit for purpose, and May makes this point, you know, you've got to have decent, clean loos and a clean pub. And also, realistically, in this day and age, you know, times change, you've got to put on some decent grub as well if you want it to survive. We can't have the government stepping in to save our pubs. And anyway, my understanding over the last 10, 20 years, as a percentage, we haven't lost that many pubs, so they're not going under anytime soon.
Good morning, it's 8 o'clock on Saturday the 25th of May. Today, Tory grandees Michael Gove and Andrea Leadsom stand down as MPs at the next election. Rishi Sunak set to spend the weekend locked away in meetings, apparently.
As 78 Conservatives now say they're standing down before the general election, the number has surpassed the number of Tories who were standing down before 1997. Will the election show similar prospects for the party?
Meanwhile, the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, claims inheritance tax goes against Tory values, with promises to put tax breaks for the middle classes at the heart of the Tory manifesto.
Russia says it's ready to cease fire in Ukraine if the West recognises the current battlefield lines.
And elsewhere, Sarah Ferguson, yes, the Duchess of York, furiously silences an audience at the Cannes Film Festival before launching into a speech about climate change. And that left the crowd completely confused.
Everyone in this room, stop. Stop. Stop. Stop. Did you see? I removed the microphone. Because all of you are saying, oh, I want to go, because where is the next party?
I know.
Stop. Should under-16s be smartphone free? A report from MPs says teens should be banned from owning smartphones because of the impact on their mental health.
It's a Manchester Derby FA Cup final for the second successive year. We'll have all the build-up ahead of City v United at Wembley. We'll be crossing live to Sophie Reaper in Manchester as both clubs making their way to London.
You may want to make the most of any dry and bright weather around today, because for many of us it is going to be the driest day of the long weekend. I'll have more details coming up.
Morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
On the smartphone issue, loads of you getting in touch, but this is an interesting one from Leslie Young, who says, my 8-year-old granddaughter has been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes and she has to have a smartphone to track her condition, but she does get jip from kids at school and from teachers. She keeps getting questioned and reported. Yeah, I get that.
It has to be a smartphone, does it?
It depends quite on what she's on, but the more the technology is developing, it would have to be a smartphone. If she's on a Freestyle Libre, then she could scan it with a separate reader device, but then if she's on hybrid. It all gets very complicated.
But she has to be on the internet on it.
No.
Well, that's the danger, isn't it? Most of the danger.
So you could turn off everything. So it's a case of, if you're using a smartphone as a medical device, I mean, because that's exactly what I do.
You don't have to use it as a smartphone.
No, you could. Ooh. It's my microphone.
The smartphone's just.
So you could turn everything else off onto flight mode apart from the Bluetooth, and then you've still got your stuff there that works.
Yeah, but that's a voluntary thing, then, isn't it?
Yeah.
Turning it on to flight mode.
Yes. Whether you could lock it out on a parental lock.
I just don't see it happening. I think the demand for them is there. The children will want them so much. I can't see how you're going to deny them a smartphone. I'm not saying I'm for them, but you try being a parent who is trying to say no to a smartphone. The only way to do it is say, no, we can't afford one, and that's that.
Yeah.
But how many parents are going to do that?
I don't know.
A lot of parents like to be in touch with their kids, you see, don't they?
Well, yes, but you don't need a smartphone to do that.
Don't you?
No. You just have an old...
To track them? But you use them
you couldn't track them. No, you couldn't track them.
I don't know. Difficult one.
It is.
Anyway,
I'd like to track you. I should have you on the tracker.
Yes, no.
I've got all the family on tracker.
I know, and I don't
track everybody.
I don't quite get that.
Yeah, it's great. You can see exactly where everybody is.
I'd feel like I was being spied on somehow.
No, it's quite nice.
I mean, not that I go off and do anything nefarious.
Oh, yeah.
No, I'm not that interesting, but...
Hands down the pub again.
Yeah, exactly. No, she's off to the off licence sort of thing. No, I don't think I want that. Or when I say I'm working and I'm actually down at the spa.
Ah,
or something
well,
like that.
yes, yeah.
Yeah, no. I think it's sort of spying, but you clearly trust.
I'm an
they
open
trust
book.
You. Yeah, clearly.
So it's
that's rather nice too, isn't it? Very endearing.
Anyway, let us know what you think. gbnews.com/yoursay.
However, we have an election to be getting on with, don't we? And Dame Andrea Leadsom has become the latest MP to announce that she's not going to stand this time at the general election.
Well, that announcement came just after Michael Gove posted his resignation letter saying it was time for a new generation to lead.
Now, as we now know, that makes it 78 Tory MPs who are leaving the Commons, and that is a post-war record-breaking exodus.
Let's talk to our Deputy Political Editor, Tom Harwood. Look, Tom, there's always churn, as they call it, but this is getting out of hand, isn't it, for the Tories?
Yeah, this isn't churn. This is a changing of the guard. No matter if the Tories actually manage to close the gap a little bit in the polls, there'll still be a completely different makeup of the Conservative Party on the green benches after the election, whichever way the votes go. Simply so many big names standing down. It's not just Sajid Javid and Nadeem Zahawi, but now, as you say, Andrea Leadsom, Michael Gove, adding to Graham Brady, and even some of the newer MPs, people like Deanna Davison, who only got in at the last election. She announced she was standing down quite some time ago. There is a huge changeover taking place now. Some people suggest that's because lots of people think they were going to lose their seats and they'd rather bow out with dignity than be turfed out by their electorates. But there are other people standing down in very safe seats, seats that the Tories even held at their nadir in 1997, who perhaps just don't fancy a spell in opposition, who perhaps think that their time in politics is over. There was a considerable changing of the guard back in 2010. But that was because of the expenses scandal. Lots of members of Parliament from all parties stood down after a bit of a push from their central party organisations because of the different issues that they've had with expenses. This time it's slightly different. It's not a push from the centre. It's those MPs making the decisions themselves. And that's quite difficult. I don't think that particularly the Prime Minister thought that some of his closest cabinet ministers would be jumping ship. It makes for quite a rocky start to the general election campaign, and perhaps that is one of the reasons why the Prime Minister isn't out and about today. Over the weekend, he's taking some time to take stock, to meet with his closest aides, and there are all sorts of rumours about a change in strategy in terms of seeing how they can up the ante, because the general election now has been going, well, this is the fourth day day since the announcement, and the polls haven't really shifted. So the Conservative Party, and indeed the Prime Minister, needs to think of something big to pull out of the bag to try and shift how this general election is going, because as things stand, it seems that people simply aren't changing their minds.
Although, Tom, he is speaking well, isn't he? Apart from the fact that he keeps saying everything's bold decision and he's being very bold about it. I mean, that clearly has been the word they decided on. But, you know, he seems very energised. It's just that nobody in Conservative Central Office seems to have thought about some of the optics, like the rain, like speaking from the Titanic, for heaven's sake.
Yes, the Titanic Quarter in Northern Ireland. I mean, in Belfast. I mean, quite remarkable optics and place setting. And some people around the Prime Minister are quite new to the game. James Forsyth, for example, was a journalist for a long time before joining Number 10 in just the most recent months. But this is, I think, something that is almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. When you're 20 points behind in the polls, many observers almost look for the sort of analogies in terms of what you're doing. Perhaps in previous elections there have been many situations like this. For example, a party leader being pictured next to an exit sign or standing in a particular location and all the rest of it. It almost feeds into a narrative simply because the Prime Minister is 20 points behind in the polls. It almost makes people look for more of these optic issues. I don't think they're the reason he's behind in the polls, but they certainly don't help. And here's the other point, and I think it's very, very wise of you to pick up on this, that the Prime Minister is a slick operator, he speaks well. The problem for him is that people aren't listening. People are sort of switching off when he starts to speak. They're not giving him a hearing. And perhaps that's one of the reasons he decided to go early in this general election, thinking that even if the economy picks up, as it's expected to do over the next few months, will people actually reward the Prime Minister, or are they so sick of this constant churn and change at the top of politics that actually they're not going to give a hearing to the person who perhaps in other times would be given that credit?
Maybe so. Tom, thanks very much indeed. Well, Tom was talking about the polls not moving much. Let's talk to Head of Policy and Public Affairs at Opinion Research, James Crouch, who's here. Morning to you. Would we have expected to see a tightening of the polls at this stage normally?
Well, this campaign has started off pretty much the way we all expected it to, which is double-digit Labour leads, double-digit lead for Keir Starmer as the best Prime Minister. None of that looks like it's fundamentally changed, and no one really thinks it's been a good first couple of days for the Prime Minister. The question mark is that going to narrow, as you say? And there are a big number of Tories who just don't know how they're going to vote yet. I think about 1 in 5 of Conservatives last time say, don't know, I'm sitting on the fence. Big problem is, we just won't know until the very last minute. We love to eke things out in politics anyway, but all the evidence is we'll find out last 2 weeks, last 1 week maybe. They'll sit on the fence right up until then.
I was talking to a load of loyal Tories the other day who said they can't bring themselves to vote Tory, and they definitely can't bring themselves to vote Labour, so they're simply going to not vote. And I've never heard them speak like that before. You wonder how many people simply aren't motivated to take part in this election at all.
Yes, so, well, that's one of the big things that everyone says is really different to 1997, when the last Labour government came in, is that there was quite a lot of enthusiasm, there was excitement. Here, there's pessimism and disenchantment, and that goes from the economy, that goes into politics. I think even some people in the Labour Party are a little bit worried about what they're actually going to face when they get into government. So there very definitely is a big element of that, and turnout was relatively high last time, so there's no reason to expect it won't go down, but what impact that's actually going to have and whether or not people think just at the last minute, no, I've got to go out and vote. Don't know what way yet, but I've got to do it. That there probably will still be that number. So the Tories will be hoping they just come back to the Conservatives and narrow that gap just a little bit.
It's interesting, though, because actually, if you've got a load of Tories who, you know, I know that's anecdotal, but if that was the case, who say, I'm just not going to vote this time. That's actually really bad news for the Labour Party, isn't it, in terms of, well, they'd walked to victory this time round, but actually in another 5 years it could put them in a very perilous position.
Well, this is the question of how deep is that Labour support. And I think one of the challenges the Conservatives have had is that people have basically said, we've not really governed very well. And the reason why that is they've put themselves in a politically difficult position, so they've not actually felt confident to fight a lot of these big policy battles. Now, Labour are going to come in and they're going to find that they're going to have to unopen the too difficult box, and that will result in people saying, well, actually, this isn't quite what I voted for, this isn't what I asked for. That's the big challenge, and that's the concern that they'll have. But then, obviously, politics will move on in 5 years, and maybe we'll be in a totally different place.
Yes, it could be completely different, couldn't it, the landscape. Over the next 6 weeks, then, how often do pollsters do their polls? For instance, at Opinion, how often do you go out there and see if the mood is changing?
So we're going to be doing it at least weekly, possibly twice a week. I think one of the most striking things is that we've been doing that for quite a long time, and very, very little has moved. It's sometimes a little bit frustrating when you have to say the same thing. But also, there are the two leadership debates that I think we're going to have, and they do tend to still basically suck all the attention up for while they're there. So there's a chance that they could move something. And as I say, there's no reason to expect that we're not going to get to the last 2 weeks of the campaign and suddenly things start to move a little bit. Suddenly things start to shape up. Yes.
Just very, very briefly, only because we get loads of messages about this whenever we do anything about polls. People say, well, I've never been asked a question. Who takes part in these polls? How do you get people?
So I almost want to say the little bit of the science and a little bit of the art is that what you're aiming to do is to get 2,000 people together that look like the country. And you can demonstrably say that because of who they are, how they said they voted last time, all these kind of things that you can control for. And we put an awful lot of effort as well to making sure that they're people who don't read the news all the time and aren't really excited that they've been asked about how they voted for the 8th time this month. So we put an awful lot of work to make sure that they do actually look like you if we were to come and knock on your door.
Right. Lovely. Good to see you, James.
Have
Thank
you
you
ever
very
been
much
rung up
indeed.
and asked your opinion?
No.
No, me either.
No. Well, yeah, but we're not your sort of usual candidates. We probably know too much, don't we, James? We know too much.
Or think we do.
Yeah, jack of all trades, master of none, that's me. Look, earlier we spoke to Economic Secretary to the Treasury, Bim Afolami. He had this to say on the Chancellor saying he really wanted to just ditch inheritance tax.
Well, I think what the Chancellor was saying is that, of course, we'd like for nobody to pay inheritance tax ever, but that obviously isn't, reality. Taxes are there and things have to be paid for. So I wouldn't sort of take it beyond that. But, we'll come out with our tax plans, in the coming weeks during the campaign.
There you are. Yes, it's interesting that the Chancellor decided to suddenly say that. It's like it's out of the blue. It's like he hasn't thought about it before, but he said inheritance tax isn't very Tory, which suggests change. Earlier, we also spoke to the former Labour advisor, Lauren Bell-Cross, and he had this to say on the same subject.
I was surprised by how cautious Jeremy Hunt and the Conservatives have been on this, because I would have thought with this announcement now, they've got to go something big and sort of throw a bit of red meat to their activists and say, right, this is a big tax thing that Labour wouldn't dare do, and we're now doing. But then the fact that they're not and trying to say, oh, well, we're steadying the ship, we're being responsible. But if you've been in charge for 14 years and let's be honest about this, things aren't going great for them when you're 20 points behind in the polls. It's not really a great sell for people, is it? I think what Labour's going to have to put out a fully costed manifesto, and I think they'll do that very, very shortly with all the details of all the funding, particularly, I think, on issues like Great British Energy. They're going to have an answer for.
Well, we've also heard today from Sir Ed Davey, leader of the Liberal Democrats.
There are so many seats that have been traditionally Conservative that the Liberal Democrats are the ones who can take off them. And increasingly in the southwest, the West Country, which used to be a stronghold for the Liberal Democrats, we're back there again. We've seen that in the by-election victories in Somerset and Devon. We've seen that in council victories this year in Dorset, last year in Devon, the previous year in Somerset. So across the south of England, I think people realise now if they want to get rid of the Conservatives, they vote Liberal Democrat.
Well, over the last few days, we've seen parties across the four nations beginning their campaigns to win your vote. Plaid Cymru launched their campaign in Cardigan, and its leader, roundup, I hope I've said it right, said that they're fighting for Wales to be heard at Westminster.
One of the key words, I guess, for us going into this election is fairness, and that takes many forms. Fairness in funding, to make sure that we get rid of the old Barnett's formula that doesn't work for Wales. It hasn't worked for decades. Fairness in terms of making sure that we have consequentials of HS2 rail funding so that we can build our infrastructure here in Wales, rather than be robbed of billions of pounds as we are now by the Tories, and as Labour say they will continue. Fairness so we can invest in our future economy, for example, through making the most of our renewable energy by having the Crown Estates devolved. On so many levels, we have a desperate need to make sure that the UK government, whoever that is aware of Wales's needs. The way to make sure that we're not ignored at Westminster is to make sure that Plaid Cymru is there shouting for us.
Well, it's 8:19. Let's have a look at some of the other stories coming into the newsroom for you this morning.
Well, the former boss of the Post Office has been accused of living in La La Land over her role in the Horizon scandal. That's Paula Venables, and she again became very emotional on the third day of giving evidence. She's cried every day. She admitted making mistakes and accepted there was no one else to blame, but claimed that she didn't know why important information had not reached her.
An Italian teenager who died of leukemia is set to become the Catholic Church's first millennial saint. Pope Francis has attributed 2 miracles to the youngster. He apparently, when he was alive, used his computer skills to spread the Catholic faith. He died when he was just 15.
And the documentary filmmaker Morgan Spurlock has died at the mere age of 53. He came to prominence with his Oscar-nominated film Super Size Me in 2004, which tracked his health whilst he ate nothing but McDonald's for a month. The film was credited with prompting a very broad conversation right across the world, actually, about how fast food and rising obesity was impacting society. He died in New York due to complications from cancer.
Oh, any dentists watching this morning? Oh, I'm struggling.
What's happened?
I'm struggling. But I think it's a normal thing. I had to have had a crown last Friday, and now, honestly, teeth are killing me. It keeps...
What, just the pressure from?
Well, it's not, because can't feel any pressure in it, but it's now hurting at the bottom where the crown was at the top and all that. But I think it just upsets all the nerves in your mouth, doesn't it?
It's funny you should say that, because I had a crown fall out in the last week, right? And so there's just a jagged edge there, and my tongue keeps catching on it, and it really hurts. And once you've bitten it against it and your tongue hurts, it goes on doing it. You keep doing it, don't you? So we're both going to go and have to visit the dentist.
Well, I'm hoping this should just fade off, because it's not even hurting on the tooth. It's just like
just the general pressure. It is. Oh. It's pushing against the rest of your
I'm popping pills like you wouldn't believe.
I was just going to say you need to take a painkiller. Yeah. And I need to go and see the dentist.
Yeah. So you haven't been to get that looked at?
To get it looked at, no. So I've just got jagged. Have you a jagged edge.
Well, you've got to remortgage first.
Yes, absolutely. And why do these things always happen just before a bank holiday weekend when there's no dentist available? So there you are. So I'm going to have to bite my tongue all weekend.
Oh. Hopefully this is going to start.
Sorry about that.
It's just kicked in the last couple of minutes.
Have you got a painkiller?
I know. I've just popped one now.
Oh, right, OK. So
Thanks for watching.
Okay, sorry.
All right, let's have a check on the weather for you. Here's Alex.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning. Here's your latest GB News weather forecast brought to you by the Met Office. It's fair to say the weather this weekend is going to be pretty messy. However, today actually looks largely dry for many of us because there's a relatively slack flow across the country at the moment, though there are some systems waiting out towards the west and the east, which are going to bring some rain later. But for the time being, a bit of a chilly start because we had some clear skies overnight. That does mean quite a bit of sunshine this morning. However, we are going to see a bit more cloud bubbling up as we go into the afternoon, and there will be some showers around, most of us avoiding these, but towards eastern areas, East Anglia, Lincolnshire, we are going to see a bit of rain pushing its way in as we go through the afternoon. In any sunshine, it's going to feel pleasantly warm. Temperatures a touch higher than yesterday, highs of around 22 or 23 Celsius. It is going to turn pretty wet as we go through this evening and overnight. We have some rain across northern and eastern parts, and then a swathe of wet weather feeding its way up from the southwest. Could see some heavy bursts as that pushes its way northeastwards across many parts. Because of the cloud and the rain, temperatures aren't going to drop a huge amount, so it's going to be a milder start to the day tomorrow than it was this morning. It is also going to be quite a cloudy and at times wet picture. Most of us will see some rain at times. Showery outbreaks to start off with, and then plenty of showers developing as we go towards lunchtime and the afternoon. Some of these could pack quite a punch. Some torrential downpours are possible, as well as some hail and some thunder. There will be some sunny spells in between the showers though, and in any of these it should still feel warm enough, even though temperatures are down a couple of degrees compared to today. A quick look to Bank Holiday Monday, and after an initially dry start in the east, it's going to be another largely cloudy picture for many. Further outbreaks of showery rain. Again, these could be a little bit heavy at times, but there are some signs that we could see something a little bit drier developing towards western and southwestern parts as we go through the afternoon. Temperatures, though, down a little bit compared to tomorrow. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Now, £20,000 has to be won in the Great British Giveaway, so make sure you don't miss out because lines are going to close on Friday. These are the details you need.
It's the final week to see how you can win a whopping £20,000 cash. And because it's totally tax-free, every single penny will be in your bank account to do whatever you like with. £20,000 in tax-free cash really could be yours this summer. Hurry, as lines close on Friday. You've got to be in it to win it. For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Yes, very good luck. And remember, the lines close on Friday. Now, anybody who's anybody, darling, especially in the entertainment world, is in Cannes at the moment.
Yes.
And so was Sarah Ferguson, that's the Duchess of York. But somewhere along the line, she appears to have lost her cool. We'll be looking at why in a couple of moments.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News. The People's
Channel. GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Have government done enough, do you think, to actually help them out?
I think there will be occasions where people have tried to run a venture, whether it be a pub, a restaurant or anything sort of like that, in the hospitality sector, and it hasn't become commercially viable because of costs, because of bad accounting or because of bad business people. That is just a fact of life. That happens in every sector. So there will be pubs that are closing because they've been poorly run. But I do think there will be occasions where people are forced out of the market. So if local councils aren't being able to pass on business rates, for example, maybe central government can do more. It always tries to do more to cut beer duty and things like that to keep pubs going. So I don't think it's necessarily just as plain as what James is saying, is that, you know, bad pubs will just inevitably be falling by the wayside.
The idea that you two gentlemen, you raging capitalists, support the government stepping in to protect pubs seems to be particularly peculiar. If a pub isn't commercially viable, it has to be allowed to fail.
Well, Sadiq Khan, you know, he has a nighttime czar that he pays well over 100 grand.
Yes.
And businesses are going under like you wouldn't believe in London.
She's a real nightmare.
What's your point?
Well, the point is that Labour aren't exactly helping out these businesses, are they? So
I'm saying that pubs should not be protected by the state. I'm all for a pub.
Well, I'm not suggesting that we subsidise pubs.
That has been suggested. That's what James May is railing against. Although I have to say, it's all very well for James May and presumably his very posh gastropub. But if a pub is not fit for purpose, and May makes this point, you know, you've got to have decent, clean loos and a clean pub. And also, realistically, in this day and age, you know, times change. You've got to put on some decent grub as well if you want it to survive. We can't have the government stepping in to save our pubs. And anyway, my understanding over the last 10, 20 years, as a percentage, we haven't lost that many pubs, so they're not going under anytime soon.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
The most extraordinary thing happened at the Cannes Film Festival.
It was all to do with the Duchess of York, Sarah Ferguson, of course, who I have to say looked fabulous. But she was giving some speech, and I think it was in aid of a charity, particularly. But she stood in front of this great crowd of people, and as I was saying earlier, they're all the sort of people from the entertainment industry who want to be seen and were obviously there to have a good time. Well, this is how it went down. Basically, she couldn't shush them.
Everyone in this room, stop. Did you see? I removed the microphone. Because all of you are saying, oh, I want to go, because where is the next party?
Well, that's what
Did
you're
you
there for, to
see?
go from party to party.
I removed the microphone.
Yes, I know, it was
It's very odd.
slightly hectoring tone, a bit headmistressy, really, wasn't
dear.
it?
Well, anyway, let's see what Stephanie Tecci makes of it all, because she's there.
Stephanie!
Don't you know? Nice to see you, darling. I mean, this is all very strange.
It is, Stephen and Anne. Well, Fergie's been on a warpath this week here in Cannes. I caught up with her earlier this week, and she's taken her role of being a global citizen Gen Z ambassador really seriously. So she got appointed this role earlier this year. And I think what she's been doing, she's been using all of her appearances to kind of talk about the generational guilt she feels about how her generation have destroyed the planet. Amphar now is one of the biggest events that takes place in Cannes. It's all a fundraiser for HIV and AIDS. And the Duchess got on stage after a portrait of the late Queen had been sold for over £400,000. She was trying to deliver a speech, but as you can imagine, Stephen, and it's a room full of almost 400 people, A-listers. You're not going to get everyone being quiet at the same time. And unfortunately for Fergie, I don't think she read the room well, because most people, if I'm honest, were just there to see Cher. But during the night, they raised £16 billion. So the money was raised, but it's just that I felt like it was the wrong time for Fergie to deliver such a speech.
Yeah, I tell you what, though, I mean, when you look at her, and she did look fabulous, you have to remember that here is a woman who had breast cancer less than a year ago and now is fighting also skin cancer. So she's really had a rotten year health-wise and still looks that fabulous and has got that much oomph and energy in her. You have to admire, don't you?
I totally admire Fergie. You know, when I did my interview with her this week, she's clearly still have a zeal for life. And I think, you know, having battled both these diagnoses of cancer, she's saying that actually, you know what, I'm actually going to do some good with my time on this planet. And I think the problem is when you deliver these kind of speeches on climate and, you know, Gen Z, people just find it that you're kind of preachy, you know, especially in front of a celebrity audience in Cannes. You know, all people do, as she rightly said, all people were concerned is about partying. Once they've, you know, done the red carpet and they've taken their pictures and they've given me quotes about trying to doing good, they're inside the party, and it kind of falls on deaf ears afterwards.
Does it make any difference when I mean, the one thing that gets me about this, I know she's not the only one doing it, of course, but, you know, she's flown into Cannes to talk about, you know, and she's preaching about climate change. It's a bit hypocritical.
Well, Stephen, that's the thing. I think most of these celebrities and royals know that anything they do will be open as up for criticism. But the problem is, well, the good thing for them is it gets people talking. Because what are we doing now? We're talking about Fergie, talking about climate change and how she feels. So these people know that they will get the headlines when they're out in Cannes. And you know what? You are in a room full of A-listers. So if you do want to kind of make something that's going to go worldwide, why not do it in Cannes? But again, you are going to be receiving that criticism for flying into one of the most luxurious places in the world.
Well, that's right. And it's not just parties. There are also, obviously, premieres of movies. And Dame Helen Mirren was on the red carpet last night in Cannes. Did you see her? She's made her pictures all over the papers that have been able to print it fast enough. And she looks unbelievable.
Well, Dame Helen Mirren, she's quite a regular at Cannes, and she comes here every single year. She does a lot of work with L'Oreal, so when she comes here, she tends to do a lot of workshops with them, talking about, you know, beauty, aging. But of course, she is a legend of the cinema, and that's the good thing about Cannes. I think people like coming here to celebrate film, watch new films. Like, there's over like 22 films now, which is in the competition. So for each film, they've literally brought the stars out to watch it at the Crozet. So Cannes is definitely the place where we can celebrate some of our greats, including Helen Mirren.
And afterwards, there's always party on somebody's yacht, isn't there?
Okay, there have been a lot of yacht parties and a lot of champagne. I think that's what Cannes is for. I think it just becomes this dream world of parties and excess, and lots of excess of parties and stuff like that. And, you know, for me, I'm ready to come home now. I've had a bit too much partying.
You partied out, Steph. That's a first.
Yeah. I really am. I really am.
Lovely. Well, look, as soon as you're back, can't wait to see you in the flesh. Thanks very much indeed.
I look forward to catching up with you guys. Take care.
Yeah, you too.
I've been following her, well, I follow her on Instagram. And honestly, you wouldn't believe what she's been up to. She had like a fortnight in India, doing all incredibly glamorous stuff, and then she's gone straight from there to Cannes, where she's been living the high life.
Yeah.
Honestly, she does all right, does our Steph?
Yes, she does, yes. Well, it's her job to be there, where everybody likes to be seen to be.
We're in the wrong job.
Yeah, especially the air conditioning in this studio at the moment. It's freezing. It looked really much nicer in Cannes.
I know, I was saying to Anne before, don't moan, because the last few weeks it's been like a desert in here. It's been so hot.
Well, somebody's overcompensating today. I'm sitting here freezing.
It's either on or off.
I've got a glass of water and I think it's turned to ice. Right, this afternoon, big stuff on football because it's the FA Cup final. So we'll be talking that next. Don't go away.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your-say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Well, Welsh farmer Gareth Wyn-Jones is a first-language Welsh speaker and joins us now. Gareth, I mean, a lot of people will be thinking, hang on, this guy is a Welsh teacher. He speaks English. He knew what was on the parking ticket. He's just trying to make a point. He's being a prat, isn't he?
No, hey, come on, mate. I'm a first language Welsh. It's important that we watch after our language and, you know, that everything's bilingual. For us in Wales, you wouldn't go to France and expect your ticket to be in English, would you? You know, English is the most spoken language, but let's watch after these small languages. It's part of our cultural. So, you know, I take my hat off to the guy. Fair play to him for go out and to fight this. But what it's done is put it onto the mainstream media, and you're talking about it, even that you're calling them a that. You know, at least we're having a discussion about it, and it's putting the Welsh language in the forefront. And, so, you know, Sarah Cymraeg speaking Welsh is important.
Yeah, so Gareth, this is a matter of principle. Is there a sense that the Welsh language is being eradicated in Wales? Is this something that the Welsh people need to rise up against?
Well, Welsh Government are trying to, you know, bring a lot more Welsh speaking into our daily life and teach people how to speak Welsh. Well, everything should be bilingual then. And I think, you know, it should start with government. So government should be putting pressure on these companies to make sure everything is bilingual. So I get behind this guy. Fair play to him. It's a good stance, and it puts it in the public eye. Let's have everything in both languages, especially Welsh, because that's my first language. And I'm not
what? If I was Welsh, if I were Welsh, I think I would agree with you. I think I would agree with you, Gareth.
It depends if you come from Wrexham.
All right, let's have a look at the sport this morning. Aidan's here. I was going to say there's only one thing to talk about. That's not strictly true.
No, it's not strictly.
Actually, but it's certainly the biggest thing today, and that's the Manchester derby.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, look, there's a big game in Scotland as well with the Old Firm match. Yeah. First time we've seen an Old Firm Scottish Cup final in 22 years. But I want to focus on events at Wembley. I'm going to the game later on today, but for now we're going to cross live to Manchester and Sophie Reaper, who I believe has some fans with her, or has been talking to some fans throughout the morning as they make their way to London. Sophie.
Well, we're on countdown officially now. Just under 6.5 hours to go until the kick-off of that Manchester derby down in Wembley. Now, it's always a tense day in Manchester when these two sides come together, but the fact that there's silverware involved always just makes things a little bit more tense, always make things a little bit more competitive. We've been here in Manchester this morning, we've been chatting to United fans, we've been chatting to City fans as they've been coming into the city centre to catch transportation down to Wembley, and this is what they had to tell me ahead of the Manchester derby.
2 City, 2 Haaland, 1 Foden and 1 Bernardo Silva.
Oh, I think we've got to get it, Man United. We've not had a good season. We want the excitement.
The way they've been playing, I'd say 50-50.
Bit nervous and what have you. Not had a great season, but we weren't doing great and we still beat Liverpool a few weeks ago. So anything can happen in 90 minutes, can't it?
It's derby day. I'm always nervous on derby day. Obviously, the added pressure of it being an FA Cup final.
Well, we can hear there's some nerves on both sides, as there always is on a derby day. I'm sure many of our viewers will remember that these two sides came together at this time again last year in the FA Cup final, and it was City who managed to take the trophy. Interesting fact, the last time that happened, where two sides took each other on 2 years in a row in an FA Cup final, that was in 1885. So a historic day today, City versus United. Who will take the trophy? We'll soon see.
Thanks very much indeed, Sophie. Good to hear from you in Manchester. We hope everyone has a safe trip to Wembley as well. There have been travel disruption in years gone by at various finals, but we hope there'll be none today. And I'll be among the crowd as well.
Yes, you'll love it.
I know.
You'll be there.
What about the Old Firm derby then?
So, as I say, the first time they've met, it's incredible to think they've never met in this particular final for 22 years. But they're the two dominant teams in Scotland, have been for absolutely decades. And so, having said that, if we look at the matches between the two this season, Celtic certainly have had the upper hand. They've had 3 wins and a draw. It was enough for them to win their 3rd successive league title, their 12th in 13. So they're going into this match as the favourites, quite rightly, with the upper hand. Rangers did win the League Cup earlier in the season, so they can actually get a double. Celtic are chasing a double as well. Brendan Rodgers extremely confident leading up to that game. And as I say, it's quite rare that we'd have a derby of this magnitude in London and with the English FA Cup final, and a derby of this magnitude in Scotland as well. But as I say, the FA Cup final and the Scottish Cup final, big days in both countries, in both sides of the border in terms of what it means. Because when I was a kid, it used to start on terrestrial TV, the build-up, at 9 a.m.
Well, you football people can talk. There's no doubt about that. I always used to look at the coverage like that and think, what a great job you have. You love talking about football. Yeah. And then you get the best seat in the house, and then you talk about it afterwards as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm paying 145 quid for Wembley today, but when I used to go for free, when I was working there, you used to get a hell of a lot of food. I mean, I almost came out with a food baby.
You've always liked the hospitality.
Yeah, I do.
We know you like hospitality.
We didn't get booze with it, not in the 2000s anyway.
You have to buy your own pies today.
My sister's just texted me and said, would you really go to an FA Cup final, Anne? She thinks, I would, but I'd want to do it in the proper hospitality box.
Yeah, well, stick with me and I might get you in there.
Just go in the cheap seats, would you?
Oh, gosh, no. No,
that's what I mean. That's what I'm talking about.
No, if you're a really keen football fan, then you don't mind, do you? But I'm not. I want to go for the event.
Honestly, covering it was something special. It really was. It was absolutely.
I'll bet.
Well, you'll enjoy yourself this afternoon, Aidan.
How posh is your seat today?
Well, as I say, 100. I understand
we're being hurried on.
I understand we have access to a lounge, but I'll tell you what. I'll let you know tomorrow.
All right. Yeah. Pictures, please.
Absolutely.
Right. There you go. Now shut up, you two. Otherwise, we're never going to get to the papers with Cindy Yu and Fraser Byers. That's in a couple of minutes.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
2,000 football banning orders have been issued to England fans ahead of this summer's Euro 2024 tournament in Germany. But authorities think that more than 300,000 England supporters could go to Germany, with Scotland fans, of course, also expected to travel in huge numbers. Well, I'm joined now by GB News' home and security editor, Mark White. Mark, welcome to the show. So you went to a press briefing this morning. As I understand, the authorities are gearing up to tackle what they see as a huge wave of potential hooliganism at the tournament. What's the latest?
Well, they're certainly not saying they're expecting hooliganism, and they are preparing for the worst, of course, if it happens, but hoping for the best. They say that in recent tournaments, England fans and, of course, Scotland fans have been pretty well behaved, but there will be very significant numbers attending that tournament, which gets underway in just over 5 weeks' time. That first match is Scotland taking on Germany in Munich, and of course just 2 days later it's England against Serbia near Dortmund. So 300,000 England fans alone they're expecting, because it's so accessible. I spoke earlier to Chief Constable Mark Roberts, who is the national lead for football policing. This is what he told me.
Positive, England fans got a great record at recent tournaments. We know when any number of that people travel, there's always potential for issues, but I think the German authorities are really well prepared. And I think one of the positives, particularly thinking about our fans, Germany's a beer drinking culture, so the police are well aware of dealing with people in the nighttime economy. They deal with plenty of big festivals, so I think we're going to a place that is well suited to work with us to keep everyone safe and make sure there's no issues.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is the nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them. They catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
All right, time for the papers this morning with Cindy Yu from The Spectator and Fraser Myers from Spite. Good to see you both this morning.
Fraser, everybody is talking about these weight loss injections that are becoming very popular, but they have an unusual use as well, do they not? There's a good side to all of this.
Well, it's they're turning out to be sort of miracle drugs. Ozempic or Wegovy, as is prescribed in the UK. I mean, they actually started as diabetes medication.
Type 2 diabetes drugs.
For type 2 diabetes. Then it was noticed that they had this amazing effect on weight loss. And now we're seeing that they can dramatically reduce deaths from kidney disease. This also, so around 24% lower with people taking semaglutide, which is the official name of the drug. And a few weeks ago, we had another huge study saying that they can cut, heart disease as well.
Is this because of the weight loss that they cause, or is it a direct effect?
Well, what was interesting, it doesn't say in this article in relation to kidney disease, but certainly in relation to heart disease, it was independent of the weight loss. So some people who found the drug wasn't so effective for their weight loss were still finding these benefits from the heart disease. It's probably to do with, the way it regulates your hormones and metabolism and things like that. So, these drugs are incredibly exciting. You almost wonder if they can be put in the water or something.
A lot of people get very sick off.
Well, they feel sick, certainly, don't they?
But of course, the other thing is there's lots of other things that do. I mean, the kidney issue has been very serious in the past, but now things like ACE inhibitors that people could take as tablets, often for blood pressure, have exactly the same effect. They can reverse kidney damage. So, I mean, it's out there already.
Yeah, certainly. But I think, it's always good to have, knock-on effects, positive side effects to drugs. And, I suppose maybe, we don't know, is this the cheapest way of dealing with kidney problems, as you suggest, if there are other drugs available out there, because these are quite expensive.
They're certainly expensive at the moment, aren't they?
Yeah, and I've heard of people without prescriptions getting them kind of on dark market. Makes it sound dramatic, but we're getting it from other people. Exactly. Just to lose a couple of kilograms for your summer body and that kind of thing. Which I'm a little bit worried about that kind of
fighting weight loss, weight gain, and any benefits it might have for your kidneys or your heart seems like a brilliant move. Do we really want to become a society where we're injecting ourselves all the time with various...
Yeah, of course. I mean, the thing about it...
I spend my life doing
I know you do. But you do for a very good reason. I just wonder
I'm not sure what else you can
want.
do for that. But if you've got heart disease, for example, exercise, healthy eating, all of that stuff does also matter as well. But, Fraser and I were just saying in the green room, this is nicer than the kind of government nudges that they've talked about with, like, buy one, get one free pizzas and, kind of the war on sugar, all of that kind of stuff. I think obviously you have to live a healthy lifestyle, but if there are certain things that your body can't control, and that's what they say about weight gain as well. Sometimes it's inherited. Yeah. It's not always what you eat. No. Sometimes people have a gene for it.
I just wish we hadn't mentioned pizza. I'm on a diet.
It would be nice if people don't have to diet. People, it's hard work, right? I mean, it would be great if people could eat whatever they liked.
Yeah, but then what you see,
there'll be a side effect.
It gets much more complicated than that.
It's all right, Stevie. You're justifying being on a diet. You're doing it the good way.
I know. Cindy, can we have a look at this in the Telegraph about Putin saying he really wants this ceasefire? Because all this, it's not just about Putin, it's not just about Russia and Ukraine. It ties in with the China issue and Xi Jinping as well, doesn't it? I mean, it's this huge, complicated issue.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so the story itself is that aides close to Moscow, close to Putin, have told Western reporters that the Russians are ready for a ceasefire based on current front lines. And let's be clear, the current front line is around 18% of Ukraine.
Right.
So this is not a good deal for Ukraine. But what the Russians supposedly think is that actually they're reaching a stalemate, that without another mass mobilisation of Russians, they wouldn't be able to push any further. So, of course, it makes sense for them to end the war. But I think this offer being out there could also be a mind game. It could be a way to kind of sow this kind of dissent amongst Western allies to kind of turn it back onto Ukraine. Ukraine, why won't you accept the ceasefire? Because there is a good argument to say, if you accept it now, you'll be saving many, many more Ukrainian lives as well. But obviously the question is, will Russia not try again? Because this is what they did to Crimea in 2014.
Putin the peacemaker.
Absolutely. And Stephen, to your question about the Chinese aspect, China and Europe are engaging a trade war at the moment. There's no other way to put it. And the only way that Europe can be ever so slightly nicer, I think it's too far gone, to be honest, but ever so slightly nicer is if China can get Russia to the negotiating table, because China's position on Russia is one of the biggest things for Brussels when it comes to why they are angry with China. But, if this is the way a ceasefire comes, rather than any retreat or anything like that, I think it would be hard to swallow for a lot of Western allies.
Yeah. The timing is interesting as well, because it's not been that long since the US Congress approved this huge spending package for Ukraine, and clearly that has not had time to filter through to the front line to be able to.
It also, Putin's quite clever here. It also makes it an election issue in the States, here, and probably elsewhere too.
People are very weary, growing weary of the war.
Everybody's going to be asked about that, aren't they? Fraser, can you tell us about this London-born teenager who is going to be a saint?
Yes, so he is. His name is Carlo Acutis. He very tragically died at just 15 years old. But lived an incredibly, pious life. It seems that he was, all his life, he, cared about poor people, impoverished people. He moved to Milan, but he saw the sort of poverty and desperation in his hometown. Born in London, actually, and he.
And only 20 odd years ago. Not very long ago.
Yeah, and. But he tragically died, and he's had several miracles attributed to him, which is obviously the condition you need to be considered a saint.
Since he died, normally it's miracles that you perform when you're alive, isn't it? Normally, and this is.
I think it can be both.
The rationale is that people have prayed to him since he passed away, and then have had sort of miraculous recoveries. I mean, one thing that's interesting. So this nickname is God's influencer, because he was also a kind of programming whiz. He set up this website which included a database of various, miracles around the world. But there is, or as people have said, he should be called the patron saint of the internet. But there is already a patron saint of the internet, as people might not know, who is Saint Isidore of Seville, who was a scholar who compiled an encyclopedia some 1,300 years ago. But perhaps it should. I know. But someone had obviously already said that that's similar enough to the internet and encyclopedia, so let's give it to Saint Isidore. But it would make sense, I think, to make Carlo Acutis.
Well, this young man, he clearly was a remarkable young boy who had an effect.
He touched a lot of people, in his very short life, which is absolutely extraordinary.
Yeah.
And
the Pope has now said we will make him a saint. He's already been beatified or whatever, I think.
Yes,
and the next step is now to be canonised. And the Pope has said yes, he should be a saint.
And he will then become the first millennial saint.
Yeah.
Yes.
Isn't it?
There you go. Look, good to see you both this morning. Thank you very much indeed. We've got lots more still to come for you, but let's get a check first on that bank holiday weekend weather with Alex.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning. Here's your latest GB News weather forecast, brought to you by the Met Office. It's fair to say the weather this weekend is going to be pretty messy. However, today actually looks largely dry for many of us because there's a relatively slack flow across the country at the moment, though there are some systems waiting out towards the west and the east, which are going to bring some rain later. But for the time being, a bit of a chilly start because we had some clear skies overnight. That does mean quite a bit of sunshine this morning. However, we are going to see a bit more cloud bubbling up as we go into the afternoon, and there will be some showers around, most of us avoiding these, but towards eastern areas, East Anglia, Lincolnshire, we are going to see a bit of rain pushing its way in as we go through the afternoon. In any sunshine, it's going to feel pleasantly warm. Temperatures a touch higher than yesterday, highs of around 22 or 23 Celsius. It is going to turn pretty wet as we go through this evening and overnight. We have some rain across northern and eastern parts, and then a swathe of wet weather feeding its way up from the southwest. Could see some heavy bursts as that pushes its way north northeastwards across many parts. Because of the cloud and the rain, temperatures aren't going to drop a huge amount, so it's going to be a milder start to the day tomorrow than it was this morning. It is also going to be quite a cloudy and at times wet picture. Most of us will see some rain at times, showery outbreaks to start off with, and then plenty of showers developing as we go towards lunchtime and the afternoon. Some of these could pack quite a punch. Some torrential downpours are possible, as well as some hail and some thunder. There will be some sunny spells in between the showers though, and in any of these it should still feel warm enough, even though temperatures are down a couple of degrees compared to today. A quick look to Bank Holiday Monday, and after an initially dry start in the east, it's going to be another largely cloudy picture for
the next Great British Giveaway winner could be you, with a massive £20,000 in tax-free cash to be won. Imagine how you'd react getting that winning call from us.
Oh my God, are you joking?
Not a wine, what is it? I've never won a penny in my life.
I don't know what to say.
Do you know what? I've never won anything like this in my life. Oh my God. Oh God. Oh, it shocked me.
This is amazing.
For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text PRIZE to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight. Every night from 11 p.m.
Apparently alcohol abuse is costing England £27 billion a year. I mean, in fairness, that's the price of 2 rounds in London, Nicholas.
Yeah, tell me about it. Not that I'm a big consumer of alcohol. I'm very Mediterranean in my consumption. But revealed, alcohol abuse costs soar to £27 billion a year. So this cost basically encompasses a variety of aspects, from health-related problems, so the cost on the NHS, lack of productivity, people who lose their jobs, social services, and all that. And of course, it has been on the rise, 37% more compared to last time this was studied in 2003. So now Institute of Alcohol Studies and some other groups are pushing or asking for tougher taxes and tougher regulation. But is that the solution? Like in ancient Rome, they said, in medium stat virtus, like moderation, virtue is in moderation. And again, if they're going to raise the price, people like myself or yourself who are moderate consumers, pardon?
You're going to turn to heroin. Because it'll become... I mean, well, this is what's happened in Scotland.
It becomes unaffordable, so...
Yeah, in Scotland, they had minimum unit alcohol pricing, and so it pushes up the cost of getting off your tree for your average Scottish ne'er-do-well who likes to sit on a bus stop and drink a bottle of cider. So instead, they're turning to street drugs, which are cheaper by comparison.
That is just terrible. I like that the alcohol industry have come back on this. A guy called Matt Lambert, who's the chief executive of the Portman Group, and they represent the alcohol industry. And he says that the IAS, that's the group who've created this, have failed to take into account the significant direct economic contribution of the alcohol industry to the wider economic and social benefits of moderate and responsible alcohol consumption. Well, it's so true, isn't it? We've got a declining birth rate. We need people to get drunk and chat each other up.
Yeah.
Good morning to you. It's 9 o'clock on Saturday, the 25th of May. Today, Tory grandees Michael Gove and Andrea Leadsom stand down as MPs at the next election as Rishi Sunak spends the weekend locked in meetings.
Meanwhile...
Yes, Andrea Leadsom and Michael Gove join Theresa May, Graham Brady, Ben Wallace, many big names, 78 now. Conservative MPs choosing to stand down at the next election. Are they jumping before they're pushed?
And then, meanwhile, the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, is claiming that inheritance tax goes against Tory values. And he's promised to put tax breaks for the middle classes at the heart of the Tory manifesto.
Russia says it's ready to cease fire in Ukraine if the West recognises the current battlefield lines.
Elsewhere, the Duchess of York, that's Sarah Ferguson, has furiously silenced an audience at the Cannes Film Festival, and then she launched into a speech about climate change, leaving the crowd utterly confused.
Everyone in this room, stop. Stop. Stop. Stop. Did you see? I removed the microphone. Because all of you are saying, oh, I want to go, because where is the next party?
That'll keep them there. Should under-16s be smartphone-free? A report from MPs says teens should be banned from owning smartphones to combat some of the damage they think it can do during mental development.
Fans of both Manchester City and Manchester United prepare to make their way to Wembley ahead of the FA Cup final this afternoon.
A massive day for the city as fans head to London ahead of the 193rd Manchester derby. Could this be Eric Ten Hag's last game in charge, and will City be able to clinch the double?
Well, it's not the only cup final on Derby Day. North of the border, it's the first Old Firm Scottish Cup final in 22 years as Celtic face Rangers at Hampden Park, and Wayne Rooney closes in on a return to management.
You may want to make the most of any dry and bright weather around today, because for many of us it is going to be the driest day of the long weekend. I'll have more details coming up.
Morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
I like Fergie.
Sarah
Ferguson.
Yes, I
liked it. I've always thought she's a bit crackers, but sort of quite like that in there. But the whole stop.
Yeah, what
Could
was
you
that
see?
about?
I took away the microphone.
Yes.
That to me is just. Crackers.
It's not reading the room properly, is it?
That's very, very odd.
And the sort of audience she was speaking to, which was sort of celebrities, A-listers, media people, they won't like being spoken to like that.
No, they won't. Well, I don't think anybody would.
But if you're royal, maybe you're allowed to be a bit eccentric.
Is she royal? She's probably not now, is she?
She's the Duchess of York.
Yeah, but not HRH, though.
No.
No, not HRH.
You wouldn't curtsy for her, then?
I don't. No. I've flown down here especially to talk to you about climate change.
Yes, I know. It's dodgy. Yeah. Like I say, read the room.
Yeah.
And the other thing is
I like her, but nevertheless.
Yeah, no, I agree. We've got to get some honey and lemon down to Tom Harwood at Westminster, because his voice is going. And I'm not surprising.
He's doing a lot of work at the minute.
He must have been talking, since they announced the election, he must have been talking almost 24 hours a day.
Yes, he never stops, does he? But anyway, election rules means that obviously people who are MPs can't really present anything at the moment and all the rest of it. So he's doing a lot of filling in.
Yeah.
But there you go.
Well,
he loves it. He loves it. He
I was going to say, yeah, they've been wanting an election. They've got one now.
Well, they have. Anyway, Andrea Leadsom has become the latest MP to say she's not going to stand at the next election.
And, of course, that came very shortly after Michael Gove had posted his resignation letter saying it's time for a new generation to lead.
Well, that means 78 Tory MPs leaving the Commons. That's a post-war record-breaking exodus.
Yes. So what do they think in Labour about that? Well, let's talk to Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Darren Jones, who joins us now. Oh, how lovely. The sun's out and the birds are tweeting behind you. That has to be a good, optimistic sign, doesn't it? There's lots to talk to you about, clearly, but these mass resignations, what's the mood like at Labour HQ?
Well, look, we're fired up and ready to go in the Labour Party. We've been preparing for a long time for this election, and we were pleased that Rishi Sunak decided to get on with it sooner rather than later. And we're out across the country. Keir's been touring the nations and regions. All of our candidates are out launching their campaigns and knocking on doors. And we're excited for the 6 weeks ahead.
Yeah, but what's interesting is through all of this, you've got to win over people. What you're weakest on, in terms of public opinion, traditionally at least, is do you trust Labour with the economy? Now, that tide may be turning, and what you've kept telling us is that everything is fully costed, and a lot of it's costed on non-dom, the non-dom tax loophole being closed, and on putting VAT on private schools. And yet, you don't even agree with that, do you? You've said you don't think it's the right policy, and you said a few years ago it wouldn't even bring in the money that the Labour Party said it would. So how can you campaign on that issue if you don't believe in it?
Yeah, excuse me for laughing, but I know that the Conservative head office has sent out a list this morning, questions to ask Darren Jones, and this has come up a few times. Look, that article, which I think was in the Daily Mail, was an inaccurate representation of me talking through the policy trade-offs with students in my constituency. But we can be crystal clear, because the Institute for Fiscal Studies, independent, cross-party, respected economic institution, has looked at our policy on the VAT loophole on private school fees, has adjusted for things like behavioural change, the way that schools have operated in the past, and they've concluded what we've concluded, that we can raise billions of pounds a year, which we will prioritise to pay for 6,500 additional specialist teachers in state schools across the country.
Just to reassure you, we don't ask questions that anyone tells us to ask, but this is an interesting...
I'm sure. I've just seen the list.
Yeah.
I've just seen the list.
I didn't know there was a list.
No, it's more than we've seen.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's still an interesting point that you don't sound fully, or you didn't once upon a time sound fully convinced that charging VAT on private school fees would be the way forward. Are you now actively saying, yes, it really is, and it's going to make a financial difference, and this is how we're going to cost other things?
Yes, because as I say, you can refer out to the Institute for Fiscal Studies report on this policy. They are expert economics professionals. They're independent of any party. They're a charity. They will be looking at Labour, Conservative, other party policies and setting out what their view is on it. And they've been very clear that closing the VAT loophole on private school fees will not result in a huge number of pupils moving into the state sector, will raise billions of pounds a year, and that will be money available to us in a Labour Treasury to invest in 6,500 state specialist teachers in state schools.
But how can you base your economics on taxes that people don't have to pay? Because whatever the predictions, people can take their children out of those schools and therefore the tax doesn't get paid. People, especially people with non-dom status who've generally got pots of money, could quite simply move out the country, then you lose that income as well. It seems pretty sort of sandy ground to be building the economy on.
This is what the economists refer to as behavioural change, and you factor that into your assumptions on the math. So on private schools, for example, private school fees have been increasing quite a lot year on year for the past number of years, and parents have paid that additional fee in order to keep those their children in those private schools. And so therefore you can assume that if schools continue to follow what they've done in the past in the future, that parents will continue to do that. And look, it's for schools to decide whether they pass on the 20% in one go or whether they phase it in over a number of years and kind of balance their books to help parents. But these are private organisations that pay commercial private fees for private education, and that's why we think the VAT loophole needs to be closed.
Rachel Reeves has done a very big interview in the Daily Mail this morning, saying that she's basically pleading with Daily Mail-type voters that she can be trusted with their money. It's interesting, clearly you're going for that middle ground, which everybody says is so important to both parties if they want to win.
Well, look, as the Labour Party, we aspire to be a party that governs the country in the interests of all of the British people. And so we will speak in this campaign, as we have done previously, to lots of different types of people in different newspapers in different parts of the country. But our message is the same to everybody, irrespective of what paper they read, which is we need to bring stability back to our economy, that Rachel Reeves and I will not play fast and loose with taxpayers' money. We will get the economy growing again, and that this approach, this stability back into the economy, is change after years of chaos from the Conservatives, which has resulted in lots of prices going up and costing families dearly over the last few years.
Yes, but you and Rachel Reeves, I mean, to be fair, exactly like the Conservative Party as well, are sort of promising sunshine, aren't you? It's, a stable economy, you're promising us growth, and yet the IFS, which is an independent body, has said the state of public finances are so bad they're going to hang over whoever the new government is like a dark cloud, and an open and robust discussion is really needed now to work out how to tackle it. Are you really taking those sort of warnings seriously?
Absolutely, and we've been saying for some time that if we win this election, we will have the worst financial inheritance of any party coming into government since the Second World War. I mean, the state of the country is beyond bad because of the chaos from the Conservatives that we've seen and their incompetence in running the country. We've been very upfront and honest with people about that. That means it will be hard, especially to begin with, but we have plans to turn the country around, to reform our public services and to change the country. And we know that that's the only way you can get the economy back onto a sustainable footing and make it secure for the future.
Jeremy Hunt has been speaking about inheritance tax, saying that he doesn't feel that it's very Tory. He's put it on the agenda, which means that you're going to get asked about your view on inheritance tax over the next 6 weeks. So what is your view on inheritance tax? Is he right, saying it's just not morally right?
Well, look, the first thing I would politely say to Jeremy Hunt is he's getting into a bit of a habit of announcing unfunded tax cuts. They've already promised to abolish national insurance altogether, costing £46 billion a year, without saying how they're going to pay for that. Are they going to cut pensions, the health service? Are they going to increase income tax? We need to know the answers to that. And now Jeremy Hunt is saying that he thinks he wants to abolish inheritance tax as well. That's going to cost billions of pounds more on top each year. So I think the Conservatives really need to set out in detail how they plan to fund and cost their policies when they announce them during this election campaign.
But what about your view on inheritance tax?
Well, we've been very clear in the Labour Party that the tax burden on working people is too high. It's the highest it has been in 70 years. That's why we have no plans to increase taxes on working people, and why we've supported the last two cuts to national insurance in Parliament before the election was called. And look, in order to keep taxes as low as possible in the future, you do have to get the economy back on track and get it growing, because that means you've got the revenue coming into the Treasury to be able to pay for our public services, and people's pay will increase in line with a growing economy.
You managed to dodge the question, though. Would you like to see inheritance tax go at some point?
Let me try again. We have no plans to change inheritance tax.
OK.
There you go. Direct answer to your question.
There you go. That's nice and clear.
The broader tax conversation is important.
Yeah, it is. Can I just ask you, though, and again, we haven't got the facts and figures, and we're not economic experts, as you well know, but we talked to your counterpart earlier on, Bim Afalami, who said that in Labour's accounts running into this election, you've got, despite the fact you say everything is costed, he says you've got a £38 billion black hole.
Bim, I mean, look, Bim knows full well that if he looks at these dodgy dossiers that his colleagues have produced in the Conservative Party, which are based on assumptions from Conservative political advisors, that they are not reflective of Labour Party policy. You can Google these dossiers, by the way, they're on the internet, and if you scroll to the bottom of the PDFs, you'll see assumptions provided by the Conservative Party political advisors. If you look at those assumptions, compare them with our 6 steps, you'll see that they're just not costing Labour Party policy. All of our policy is fully funded and fully costed, and we're very happy to answer any questions on that during this election period.
Oh, jolly good, because we'll be coming up with plenty more. Darren Jones, good to see you. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you. I wonder what you think of that at home, because a lot of people generally, even though they may not be rich enough for inheritance tax to matter to them, it does seem to be something that people don't like.
It seems pernicious.
Yeah. And then if you're also going to slam VAT onto private school fees, and we all know that there are an awful lot of parents who struggle to pay the school fees anyway, then that's another tax on that middle ground that we are told all parties need to win over.
It's interesting, though, isn't it? Because, I mean, I don't like inheritance tax. However, when it comes to private schools, because I'm from a very working-class background, with private schools, it was never an option. You could never save enough to send someone to private school. That I don't care about that one, you see.
I know a lot of parents who struggle but do it because they believe it's their choice.
You know, I just sort of think, why not send them to a state school? Why not make state schools better?
Well, that's what you want to do, ideally, but it's never really happened.
So that one doesn't resonate. So it depends what resonates with you in your life experience, I guess. Anyway, interesting, isn't it? Let's talk to Reform Party's spokesperson, Howard Cox, who's in the studio.
Hello. Hello, Anthony.
Good to see you this morning. What do you make of all of this? Because obviously with reform, and I know we hear it time and time again that there's a a document that you published online, which is your sort of contract with the people and all this sort of thing, which covers all these big issues. But we only ever hear from Reform about the one key issue of migration. How do we get to grips with what else Reform claims to be offering?
Well, I suggest you read the document, Stephen, for a start. But on a serious note, interesting listening to you talking to these, both Tory and the Labour spokesman, I didn't hear a word called growth. Well, there's no growth in the economy. Everything is about taking money and spending. And that's the sort of thing that Reform is different. It's because we want to put more money into people's pockets. Like starting when you go to work, you don't pay tax until £20,000. It's about £7,500 more than now. That will give people something like £30 a week more money in the pocket to spend in the economy, which will stimulate the economy, and they'll get more growth taxes.
That's a hell of a gamble.
It's not a gamble.
Well, it is, because you've got to fund that additional tax-free allowance in the hope that people are going to go out and spend it rather than, say, put it away for their retirement or whatever it may be.
Well, we're talking it's going to impact mainly on younger people. And that's the people. They're going to actually get the economy growing. I think you know me pretty well. For the last 15 years, I've been campaigning for the motorist. And one of the things that the big arguments and the Centre of Economic and Business Research, which I commission research, you put more money, you don't put taxes up into the economy, you bring taxes down. And certainly in terms of things like logistics and things like that, if you actually reduce the cost of motoring, driving, etc., that goes back into the economy.
How do you do that? How do you reduce the cost of motoring and driving?
Well, you cut tax. I mean, one of the things that I'm really keen, and one reason why I joined Reform, is we're going to cut fuel duty by 20p per litre. That's £10 per average family car's tank. That sort of thing. But going back to the immigration thing, which is a very central point, that is costing a huge amount of money to the economy. And so we've got to bring that down. And we're the only party saying we're going to freeze immigration.
Mm.
I mean, you say you haven't heard much mention of growth. Don't you feel this sort of, I mean, I know I do, you feel this sort of sense of it's almost stagnation, yes. Or maybe it's you know, gosh, the economy is a mess and we're all going to have to put up with that no matter what government gets in at the moment. It's pessimism almost, isn't it?
It is, and it's terrible. It's fiscal pessimism, you're absolutely right. But we need to incentivise people and bring some optimism back, and that would happen if Reform UK was running the country. There's no doubt about it, because we'd be putting money back into people's pockets. It's as simple as that.
It's a long-term aim as well, isn't
Of course,
it?
yes.
For individuals like you too.
We won't be the government on July the 5th. We know that. But this is a long journey that we're going to get there. And by 2029, hopefully, we're going to have a massive influence.
But see, what makes me slightly sceptical, Howard, is the fact when you... And smaller opposition parties tend to do this. They come up with these grand solutions. Well, we can do this is what we do. Here's a list of things we do, and it's all about getting money back to people. If it was that simple and it would generate the growth that this country desperately needs, why aren't they doing it?
It's a good question. I'm very close to something like 70, well, a lot of them are going there, 70 backbench Tory MPs. Very close indeed. People like Craig McKinley, Robert Halfon, John Redwood, all these sort of people. You talk to them, what I just said, and they would talk about growth. They would put more money into people's pockets and have low taxation. It's not a grand plan, Steve, and I accept what you're saying about small parties. But let's listen to this. And I mean,
forgive me, isn't it at least on similar lines to Trussonomics, where she was reducing taxes, but it was coming at such a cost that whether it was politically a good idea or not, the markets revolted against it and therefore stopped it in its tracks.
It's a shame the markets dictate what we actually do. And I resonate with what you're saying, Stephen, I really do. But the important thing at the moment in time is put money back into people's pockets. Because at the moment, all we're talking about at the moment, I'm hearing here, is taking money. You talked about inheritance tax. That is such a pernicious tax. It's ridiculous. And I also, on the VAT on the schools as well, that's completely wrong. My daughter went to private school. We struggled and, you know, we gave up things to send to public school because the state schools were useless.
And also, it's your choice.
Exactly.
And isn't that what we all believe in? The other word I haven't heard still yet is housing.
Yes.
And that worries me because I'm the mother of sons who all would like to be able to afford to get on the housing ladder and can't see a way forward at all. And there are no houses in their price range being built.
You're absolutely right. I've got a daughter who's 31. She drives a 40-ton articulated truck.
Shit!
Yeah, she's incredible. I'm really proud of her. We adopted her. She's special needs. She earns a very, very good salary, over £50,000 a year, but can't get on the housing ladder even with that amount of money. That's the worry.
Yeah.
Would Reform build houses?
Sorry?
Would reform build?
Oh,
houses?
absolutely. I mean, the only problem is with the current immigration situation, we've got to have to build, I think, a house in every 2 minutes.
Yeah. What about, is reform starting to unravel at this election, though? You've been a great voice for disaffected Tory voters. We hear from people getting in touch all the time. However, this business with Nigel Farage... But do you know what? It's worth... I mean, I was absolutely dumbfounded when I spoke to Ben Habib yesterday, your deputy leader, saying, do you mean Nigel was launching a campaign next week? I knew nothing about it. Nigel's saying... this vote, the election's been called forward because he was going to launch a campaign. Ben Habib says, no, that's not true. That's nonsense. So what's going on?
Well, Ben was right in the sense that he wasn't launching a campaign. Nigel isn't standing in any seat at the moment in time. He's decided this is not the right time. You've heard him said it many, many times before. And what happened yesterday, he announced, and I'm very pleased to hear, for the next 6 weeks, he's going to be out every day campaigning for Reform UK. There's no way he's going to be with the Tories, no way he believes in Labour. We know that the Tories have actually broken Britain and Labour are going to bankrupt it.
But then we also had, and it was on the channel last night, someone, Steve Miller, who says he feels furious, he said, because he thought Nigel had been flirting with him, if you like, over the last few months, and he said he was going to vote reform, and now he says, I'm not doing it. He's pulled out. He's more interested in America than he is the UK. That's reform's lost my vote now.
Well, I'm sad to hear him say that, but Nigel isn't the party. The party's bigger than Nigel. We've got a lot of good people. And Richard Tice is going to be is a great leader, and I'd love him to become Prime Minister. That man is absolutely the right person for this country.
We've got a clip of Nigel saying that, haven't we?
I think so.
Should we see if we can play it for you? No? It was a nasty rumour, I was told, that we've got a clip.
I had, to be honest with you, put in place some preparations to launch next week. I wonder whether the Conservative Party found out about it. I think the sense of panic that we saw yesterday, the badly prepared speech, might perhaps have prompted it a little bit.
To be clear, you were about to launch a campaign to stand as an MP next week.
Absolutely.
So I'm not sure how much Nigel Farage played in the Prime Minister's mind. I think there were a whole host of other reasons which moved him to call an election now. And I think from Rishi's perspective, it was probably a good move.
Are you saying then you don't believe Nigel? I mean, because the idea that he's got. Hold on a minute. The idea that he's got a general election campaign ready to roll next week, and he was planning to do it, and because of this announcement, he's shelved the whole thing. It's a bit unusual.
Well, I'm deputy leader of Reform UK, as you mentioned, and I was entirely unaware of his plans to launch a campaign next week.
Yeah, that is an embarrassing skirmish.
It's not good, is it?
Yeah, it is an embarrassment in that situation, but I can assure you, you now know what's happening. He's not staying in Nigel, but he is actually campaigning every single day for us for the next 6 weeks.
Oh,
Howard,
he is, right.
Good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Well, I'm sure you've got your views on all of that. gbnews.com/yoursay. Earlier, we spoke to the Economic Secretary to the Treasury, Bim Afalami, and he had this to say.
Well, I think what the Chancellor was saying is that, of course, we'd like for nobody to pay inheritance tax ever, but that obviously isn't, reality. Taxes are there and things have to be paid for. So I wouldn't sort of take it beyond that. But, we'll come out with our tax plans, in the coming weeks during the campaign.
Well, let's take a look at Sir Ed Davies' view, of course, head of the Lib Dems, because obviously, what are their chances of taking seats from the Tories in this upcoming election?
There are so many seats that have been traditionally Conservative that the Liberal Democrats are the ones who can take off them. And increasingly in the southwest, the West Country, which used to be a stronghold for the Liberal Democrats, we're back there again. We've seen that in the by-election victories in Somerset and Devon. We've seen that in council victories this year in Dorset, last year in Devon, the previous year in Somerset. So across the south of England, I think people realise now if they want to get rid of the Conservatives, they vote Liberal Democrat.
Just feel a little bit like this is heating up, though, now. Do you know what I mean? We're sort of getting into the swing of it now, and if we can have a sort of...
skirmish.
A robust sort of election period, that's quite entertaining.
Yes.
And it means we get to know what people are really thinking, and then hopefully that leaves you more informed as to who you want to vote for.
Meanwhile, it is a bank holiday weekend. You're almost scared of saying the words, aren't you? Because what does that mean weather-wise? Let's find out from Alex Burkill.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning. Here's your latest GB News weather forecast brought to you by the Met Office. It's fair to say the weather this weekend is going to be pretty messy. However, today actually looks largely dry for many of us because there's a relatively slack flow across the country at the moment, though there are some systems waiting out towards the west and the east, which are going to bring some rain later. But for the time being, a bit of a chilly start because we had some clear skies overnight. That does mean quite a bit of sunshine this morning. However, we are going to see a bit more cloud bubbling up as we go into the afternoon, and there will be some showers around, most of us avoiding these, but towards eastern areas, East Anglia, Lincolnshire, we are going to see a bit of rain pushing its way in as we go through the afternoon. In any sunshine, it's going to feel pleasantly warm. Temperatures a touch higher than yesterday, highs of around 22 or 23 Celsius. It is going to turn pretty wet as we go through this evening and overnight. We have some rain across northern and eastern parts, and then a swathe of wet weather feeding its way up from the southwest. Could see some heavy bursts as that pushes its way northeastwards across many parts. Because of the cloud and the rain, temperatures aren't going to drop a huge amount, so it's going to be a milder start to the day tomorrow than it was this morning. It is also going to be quite a cloudy and at times wet picture. Most of us will see some rain at times. Showery outbreaks to start off with, and then plenty of showers developing as we go towards lunchtime and the afternoon. Some of these could pack quite a punch. Some torrential downpours are possible, as well as some hail and some thunder. There will be some sunny spells in between the showers though, and in any of these it should still feel warm enough, even though temperatures are down a couple of degrees compared to today. A quick look to Bank Holiday Monday, and after an initially dry start in the east, it's going to be another largely cloudy picture for many. Further outbreaks of showery rain. Again, these could be a little bit heavy at times, but there are some signs that we could see something a little bit drier developing towards western and southwestern parts as we go through the afternoon. Temperatures, though, down a little bit compared to tomorrow. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We've been talking a lot about money in the last 10-15 minutes, haven't we? So how about a bit of money for yourselves? £20,000. That's got to be won in our Great British Giveaway.
Tax-free as well.
Yeah.
That's one of the sweetest things about it, isn't it?
Yeah. Not a penny to the tax.
Well, if you want to win it, you've got to be in it. And lines close this coming Friday. So here are all the details you'll need for your chance to win that tax-free 20 grand.
It's the final week to see how you can win a whopping £20,000 cash. And because it's totally tax-free, every single penny will be in your bank account to do whatever you like with. £20,000 in tax-free cash really could be yours this summer. Hurry, as lines close on Friday. You've got to be in it to win it. For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Right, still to come for you. Could we see a ceasefire in Ukraine? One is on the table, but it's not without its problems. We'll tell you more in a moment.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Tom Harwood. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Britain's Newsroom. Weekday mornings from 9:30.
Well, we're delighted about this because the boss of JD Wetherspoon has credited demand for fashionable Guinness as the pub chain reported a jump in sales.
Now, Guinness has benefited from a boom in demand over recent years, shaking off its association with rugby lads and old men to appeal to a much younger audience and loads more women.
We've got our Guinness here.
Oh, yeah.
Cheers to you.
Cheers.
I'm not sure about this boozing on air at this time of the morning, but I'll let you off on this occasion.
As it's you, Tim, as it's you. Now, Guinness is an acquired taste for many people, so I'm surprised it's become so popular.
Yes, it is a real surprise. I think it's always been a popular drink among the demographic you mentioned, the older guy. There's about 80 or 90% of pub trade over the last 30 or 40 years, and probably longer, are a similar range of products. But there's a varying 10, 20% according to fashion. You had vodka Red Bull 20 years ago. You had an Irish cider poured over ice, which came from no one knows where. You had Alco Pops. So there's an unpredictable range of products which have been the fashion of the moment. But the fashion of the moment, very unpredictably this time, is Guinness. And no one knows why. As you say, it's an acquired taste. Young people tend not to like it. Most of the fashionable drinks over the decades have been quite sweet. And Guinness obviously isn't. So, yes, I think the Guinness brewery, St James's Gate in Dublin, they'll say it's brilliant marketing. But like the rest of us, they rely a bit on luck.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Emily Carver. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello again, 9:33 it is already. Now...
Already?
Well, yes, it is already. Time flies, doesn't it? Russian sources have claimed that Vladimir Putin is ready to pause the war in Ukraine.
Yes, ceasefire could be negotiated if the West agreed to recognise the current battlefield lines.
Well, what does that mean? Because previously, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has ruled out the possibility of a ceasefire because he says the talks with Moscow are impossible.
Well, earlier we spoke to the defence editor for the Evening Standard, Robert Fox.
Thing going on. There is absolutely clear that this is not just a game from Putin to upset everybody as they're getting together next month, where there is a peace terms conference in Switzerland, over 70 countries, but no Russia, no China there, and no Joe Biden, who has decided, although he's in Europe, to skip back to LA to go on an election fundraiser with Julia Roberts. But it's a bit of that. But there's a very strong report from Reuters naming 5 anonymous sources, but 5 anonymous sources in the Kremlin circle saying, yes, Putin is serious about this. He wants to open negotiations. There is a threat. It's real blackmail. I'd like to talk about this. By the way, he has a lot on his plate at the moment. But if you don't talk, I'm going to trash Kharkiv, for example. That hasn't come out, but sources revealed to me last night that that's what the game is. I'm serious about this. I want peace, but I'm going to smash up Kharkiv if you don't open it. And can I just add, as you had rightly in your headline, there is a problem with Zelensky here. One of the big criticisms of Zelensky is that he didn't keep a back channel going throughout to Moscow, which he was advised to from the beginning. And actually, it's what you always have to do.
Well, even when Russia is invading your country and you're having to lose lives in order to defend battlefield lines, you have to, as a leader, keep a back door open for talks.
With things like humanitarian issues, repatriation of bodies, and that hasn't been a great success. I mean, neither side has been playing to the rules, as we know, in these kinds of wars. Not that it ever fully happens. But Zelensky himself, curiously, being what he is from his background, is acutely aware of opinion polls. He's put off the president of the election so that he's there for a bit, but he is very worried about his own position, the decline in his personal position, and he's following. And the opinion polls are very assiduous in Ukraine. It is a very fluid position.
Can I ask though, with an election happening here now, and with obviously the presidential election later in the year in the United States, how does this play into what the Kremlin's doing?
There's something else that's playing. That does very much. It's an election here. The election for the European Parliament, which may not seem a terrific deliverer of power.
It's fascinating, actually.
The game playing that's going on, unfortunately, it's game playing with people's lives and homes and territory and everything. But there clearly is something going on.
18% of Ukraine Putin would end up with if that was the case.
And would you believe him if he said, that's enough, that'll cause a ceasefire? Wouldn't stop him, would it? It's never stopped him before.
You wouldn't think so. But then it's all, as Robert went on to say, all the stuff about how China plays into all of this as well, which is just... It makes your head explode, frankly.
Yes, it does.
Trying to work it all out. It's why you need people like Robert who understand it all, frankly. Anyway, look, don't go anywhere, because we've got a bit of, well, sort of light relief with the sport. It's the FA Cup final today, and it's a Manchester derby. We'll bring you all the latest.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight. Every night from 11 p.m.
Apparently, alcohol abuse is costing England £27 billion a year. I mean, in fairness, that's the price of 2 rounds in London, Nicholas.
Yeah, tell me about it. Not that I'm a big consumer of alcohol. I'm very Mediterranean in my consumption. But revealed, alcohol abuse costs soar to £27 billion a year. So this cost basically encompasses a variety of aspects, from health-related problems, so the cost on the NHS, lack of productivity, people who lose their jobs, social services, and all that. And of course, it has been on the rise, 37% more compared to last time this was studied in 2003. So now Institute of Alcohol Studies and some other groups are pushing or asking for tougher taxes and tougher regulation. But is that the solution? Like in ancient Rome, they said, in medium stat virtus, like moderation, virtue is in moderation. And again, if they're going to raise the price, people like myself or yourself who are moderate consumers, pardon?
You're going to turn to heroin. Because it'll become... I mean, well, this is what's happened in Scotland.
It becomes unaffordable, so...
Yeah, in Scotland, they had minimum unit alcohol pricing, and so it pushes up the cost of getting off your tree for your average Scottish ne'er-do-well who likes to sit on a bus stop and drink a bottle of cider. So instead, they're turning to street drugs, which are cheaper by comparison.
That is just terrible. I like that the alcohol industry have come back on this. A guy called Matt Lambert, who's the chief executive of the Portman Group, and they represent the alcohol industry. And he says that the IAS, that's the group who've created this, have failed to take into account the significant direct economic contribution of the alcohol industry to the wider economic and social benefits of moderate and responsible alcohol consumption. Well, it's so true, isn't it? We've got a declining birth rate. We need people to get drunk and chat each other up.
Yeah.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's Newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do.
His comedy, though, is revolting. I knew her, unlike you.
That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frosty in here, isn't it?
He'll have one of me one day.
For dartball practice.
Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, as we were saying just before the break, it's a very big day in football today. Aidan McGee is here to explain.
It is. It's FA Cup final day. And you can question whether the tournament itself is as important to the football clubs as it once was. But as a day, it's absolutely enormous. It really is. In fact, we're going to cross live to Sophie Reaper because she's been with some fans this morning in Manchester. Sophie, tell us more.
Well, very good morning to you. It's always an incredibly tense day here in Manchester whenever there's a derby taking place. Today, of course, marking the 193rd time these two teams have played one another competitively. Now, if we take a look at this season, the Premier League season, Man City have fared far better than United. Of course, they've taken the trophy, whereas United have had their worst ever Premier League finish. However, this could be their chance to redeem themselves if they are able to win the FA Cup trophy today, because as we know, anything can happen on a derby day. We've been in Manchester this morning chatting to both sets of fans as they prepare to make the journey down to Wembley. This is what they had to tell me.
2 City, 2 Haaland, 1 Foden and 1 Bernardo Silva.
Oh, I think we've got to get it, Man United. We've not had a good season. We want the excitement.
The way they've been playing, I'd say 50-50.
Bit nervous and what have you. Not had a great season, but we weren't doing great and we still beat Liverpool a few weeks ago. So anything can happen in 90 minutes, can't it?
It's Derby Day. I'm always nervous on Derby Day. Obviously, the added pressure of it being an FA Cup final.
Well, you could hear there that the nerves were jangling. I think everyone we spoke to, the only one who really seemed to be confident was the young lad we heard first, who thinks it's going to be 4-2 to City. Everyone else seemed to be saying 1-0, 2-1, very, very close ties. And that is because I think no one wants to be too confident on a derby day. You just never know which way it's going to go. But kick-off is at 3, and we'll be bringing you all the latest throughout the day.
Thanks very much indeed, Sophie, and thanks also for your updates throughout the morning.
It's, do you know what, it's fascinating. They say that young lad, 4-2, very confident.
Didn't sound like a Manchester accent, though. He's more maybe Bolton.
Give over.
I don't know.
Give over.
I lived up there.
I'll tell you what, though, whoever wins, is it curtains for Ten Hag?
He wishes he did have some curtains, if you're talking about the hair. But no, I think actually, I do think it's curtains. I think he's out. I think you were right a few weeks ago. I wasn't 100% sure then, but you said it must be your judgment from covering all these stories from down the years. You can tell a man who's had enough and a man who's on his way out. But I think this could be very eerily similar to 2016. Louis van Gaal, Dutch manager, went into that final. They won it against Crystal Palace on the day. It was the only major trophy he won as Man United manager. He'd done 2 years as well, just like Ten Hag has. And he faced the axe. He was told, I think it was 24 hours after the game, that he was out to make way for Mourinho. I think that irrespective of the result today, I think you're probably seeing the last game for Ten Hag as Manchester United.
Now, you're going along, aren't you,
I'm
to
indeed.
Wembley? For those up in Manchester who can't, or anywhere actually, because both clubs attract an international audience.
Without doubt.
But in Manchester, do they put it on a big screen somewhere?
There'll be big screens. I would have thought there'd be big screens, but I think when they've tried that before...
Going to be quite nice
yes,
today.
there is, but there's also the problem with segregation.
They'd be all right.
Well, I'm not so sure, but there might be areas of the city where you're going to have big screens. Maybe someone can enlighten us on that. But it's a big enough city to have like a city area. I would have thought they're probably showing it. I mean, the other thing is it's accessible on terrestrial TV.
Yeah.
So
it'd also be on in every pub.
Yes, without doubt. Yeah, without doubt. It's not like it's on a quite a rare.
Because it's something. I mean, it's such a big special thing. It's something that you want to watch with others, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I think the FA Cup final was always like that, even if your team wasn't involved. I mean, I remember the coverage used to start on terrestrial TV, ITV and BBC from 9 o'clock. Most people would stick with the BBC because there were no ad breaks. However, it was compulsive viewing for all that time, and the TV companies had to be really creative in terms of their content as well, because the whole of the schedule was given over to them. But it used to be go out and buy the papers. Latterly, well, my brother used to have a barbecue. In fact, he used to charge us a £5 to get into it.
I've heard about. Oh yeah, not heard about this one.
Not that I go on about it very often, but
not that
yeah.
It clearly rankles.
Well, it does. It's either that or bring your own meat.
Mm.
So yeah, I brought my own meat because I wasn't impressed by what you done.
I tell you what, though, north of the border, we've got another cup final.
Another derby.
Old Firm derby. First time in, what, 22 years?
Yeah, since 2002. Yeah, exactly. Rangers prevailed that day 3-2. I remember it quite well. Barry Ferguson starred that day. However, 22 years on, Stephen, it's a much bigger thing. It's, well, not bigger thing necessarily, but it's a different game because Celtic are the overwhelming favourites. A bit like Man City are down here today. They've won 3 of the 4 Old Firm derbies this season.
Why is it called Old Firm? Is it just because both clubs are so old?
No, well, partly, yeah. Partly it's always been called that, but they are the 2 dominant forces in Scottish football going back well over 100 years now. Celtic's centenary, I think, was in 1988. In fact, they won the double that year. So it goes back to them being the first 2 teams to really dominate Scottish football. Latterly, in the 80s, you had the New Firm, because there was a challenge, actually, between Dundee United and Aberdeen. Not got together, but they just... When Alex Ferguson was manager of Aberdeen, and he challenged the Old Firm, and he won the league title a few times. Dundee United performed very well in Europe, of course, and got to the final of the UEFA Cup in 1987, losing over 2 legs to Gothenburg. So they're the New Firm, but they soon kind of dissipated over time. It's very, very difficult to usurp those 2 sides, and that's which is why it's so unique. Or no, not unique, but it's rare. It's very surprising that they haven't met in a Scottish Cup final for 22 years.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. That could be a biggie.
Aidan, thank you very much indeed. Dundee, that's where they make the Beano, isn't it? Yeah, Beano's done in Dundee. I used to love the Beano.
It's a good one.
2 clubs in
a classic.
Dundee United and Dundee, they're on the same street, effectively.
Oh, right. Yeah.
OK, well, just stick with us, because we're going to be talking about Duchess of York, Sarah Ferguson's controversial appearance at the Cannes Film Festival. That's next.
Britain's Newsroom. Weekday mornings from 9:30.
The Eurovision, according to figures out this morning, had its most disastrous night to date because viewing figures were down by 2.5 million.
So the BBC had a drag queen on telling everyone that she was boycotting it.
Who was boycotting it?
Someone called Crystal, who came on the Newsnight to say that she was boycotting her North London party because of Israel. So maybe that's why the figures are down.
They cancelled some Eurovision parties in gay bars in
Soho. Exactly. So I wonder whether that's what did it.
North London party.
I think the whole of Dalston basically not tuning in is what's caused this massive drop in ratings because of the whole controversy around Israel. I have to say, a lot of those performers needed to go and see a hygienist. I mean, that man who was the Irish entry, who's supposed to be a satanic witch. She does pop witchery or something.
She screeched.
And she screeched a lot, and then took her clothes off.
Yeah.
And then there was a sort of devil man who was gyrating around her, who obviously hadn't cleaned his teeth in years.
That was the vodka break.
Okay, fine.
That was the vodka break. When I went and got.
And I thought the Israeli entry. I mean, I didn't really like the song. I liked her dress.
But I just voted for it because
I thought the choreography was
I hated
awful.
the way she was besieged in a hotel room.
But I did also think that the Ukraine entry was quite interesting because I know that the Israeli entry got into trouble for referencing the October 7th attacks, and she had to sort of rewrite her stuff because you're not allowed to mention the war or anything like that, which is fine. But then the Ukraine entry was very war. I mean, they had kind of gunfire coming in over her.
The whole thing, there was double standards.
There was quite a lot of that,
I mean, the people outside, the queers of Palestine...
Are we going to carry on paying for it, though? Because, I mean, the BBC pays the lion's share of it. That's us.
Yeah.
And we do spectacularly every year.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's Newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do. His comedy, though, is revolting. I knew her, unlike you.
That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frosty in here, isn't it?
He'll have one of me one day.
For dartball practice.
Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
This will make you cringe. The Duchess of York has berated the crowd at the Cannes Film Festival as she told them to care less about parties and more about the climate.
The Duchess attended the elite party held on the Riviera, appearing on stage to auction off a portrait of the late Queen.
To everyone in this room, stop. Stop. Stop. Stop. Did you see? I removed the microphone. Because all of you are saying, oh, I want to go, because where is the next party?
Ooh, let's talk to Stephanie Tetchy, who's in Cannes. Where else would she be? Morning, Steph. She had a tipple.
I don't think she did, but she definitely wanted to get something off her chest. You know, I interviewed the Duchess this week, and she's very much on this mission to save Generation Z, as she likes to call it. She's been a maiden ambassador, a global citizen ambassador. So she's very much speaking out about climate change. And as she said herself to me this week, she said she's been suffering from generational guilt. But the problem is she chose the wrong crowd to talk to. This was the Amper Gala. It was very star-studded. A lot of the crowd were waiting for Cher to perform. So I think the last thing you want to hear before Cher comes on stage is being lectured about the planet. I know these celebrities like to do it, but there is a time and a place. And for Fergie, this was her time to talk about it.
Yes, I don't know if she was part of the auction process, but that portrait of the Queen, rather a strange portrait, because the Queen's got her eyes closed,
shut, yeah.
Which looks very odd. But it raised a lot of money, didn't it, Stephanie?
Yes, it raised over £400,000. You see, the good thing about that gala, you've got all these celebrities, all these high net worth individuals who come. The night alone raised £16 billion. So it was a room full of money, basically. And obviously for Fergie, she did want to pay tribute to the Queen with that speech as well. But again, if you're talking in a room full of 400 people, it's going to be hard to get their attention.
Yeah, it's getting the tone right, isn't it? I mean, look, to be fair to her, she had points to make. But as you say, it's the way she did it is just... It's just extraordinary. I've been watching it all morning, and every time it just seems really hot.
It grates on you, doesn't it? She didn't get it right.
I think it's just Fergie being Fergie. One thing, like, from interviewing her, she doesn't try to lower who she is or try to, you know, be fake. You know, when I spoke to her this week, she was saying that the reason why she is kind of relating with Generation Z so much is because she knows the pressure they feel having been judged. She says she feels she's always felt like she's been judged in the limelight. So she has a little soft spot for Generation Z.
And certainly she looked brilliant. She was full of energy. And you have to remember that this is a lady who's been very ill in the past year.
Yeah, she was wearing a dress that cost £13,000. So definitely she's brought all the stops for her fashion game for this trip. But also, you know, she has battled through 2 diagnoses of cancer. And when I spoke to her, she just has this sense, new zeal for life, optimism. She says, actually, she's got a wonderful new body.
She looked at.
All right, Steph, I've had the ordeal of looking at your social media feeds over the last week or so, where you've been having a whale of a time. In 10 seconds, what's been your favourite bit so far?
Oh, that's a hard one. I think my favourite bit was hosting my own yacht launch. That was very nice, having a lunch on a yacht.
Oh, very nice too. Stephanie, always good to see you. See you soon.
And we'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning. Here's your latest GB News weather forecast brought to you by the Met Office. It's fair to say the weather this weekend is going to be pretty messy. However, today actually looks largely dry for many of us because there's a relatively slack flow across the country at the moment, though there are some systems waiting out towards the west and the east which are going to bring some rain later. But for the time being, a bit of a chilly start because we had some clear skies overnight. That does mean quite a bit of sunshine this morning. However, we are going to see a bit more cloud bubbling up as we go into the afternoon, and there will be some showers around, most of us avoiding these, but towards eastern areas, East Anglia, Lincolnshire, we are going to see a bit of rain pushing its way in as we go through the afternoon. In any sunshine, it's going to feel pleasantly warm. Temperatures a touch higher than yesterday, highs of around 22 or 23 Celsius. It is going to turn pretty wet as we go through this evening and overnight. We have some rain across northern and eastern parts, and then a swathe of wet weather feeding its way up from the southwest. Could see some heavy bursts as that pushes its way northeastwards across